Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Stephen Faber has distrusted women since he was a child. His mother was to blame. His relationship with Camille was complicated and strained. The woman was known as demanding and intransigent to other people's shortcomings. Therefore, when in his youth he dropped out of college, his mother annoyingly showed him her contempt. For a whole year afterward, she nagged him and called him unemployed. Every day he heard the same phrase, "When will you get off my neck?" The last course left, and he didn't make it. A weakling. Life with such a woman was not pleasant. She couldn't accept her son's independence. So she put all the household chores on the boy's shoulders. But Stephen did not like to do household chores, and often under a plausible pretext to shirk the tedious work. In addition, she flooded him with criticism. Camille hated his long hair, which was shaved at the back of his head into a ponytail. She was infuriated by the careless style in Stephen's clothes. And most annoying of all was his nightlife, gambling online or going to the city's hot spots. But they weren't the guy's true hobbies. He simply found discharge in them when his mother had urgent business and she tightened her iron grip. Stephen enjoyed sitting at home, watching television, and reading books. Camille was a successful broker out of forking out decent money. Stephen, on the other hand, was wasting it. He was not wasteful, he just wanted to do everything to spite his mother. Since childhood, she considered her son a worthless person, worthless for nothing and weak character. Not once in her life did she consult with the boy growing up. The woman only told him how to live his life. But he was completely deaf to her moralizing. Just did not allow the usurper to break his protective shell. It was a silent but stubborn protest. Sure, Stephen was used to the luxuries his mother surrounded herself with. But she did it out of pure selfishness, because everything in the house was arranged to her liking. And she was used to having her orders obeyed immediately. The mansion was 15 minutes from the city, near a small picturesque river surrounded by a coniferous forest. Stephen knew how to get aesthetic pleasure from communicating with nature, so he liked to walk around the neighborhood in the evenings. This habit was formed in his early childhood from the time when his father lived with them, and Stephen felt needed and loved. Even now, having become an adult and saying to himself the cherished word, his father, his soul, as if defending, becoming weak and receptive heart, warming the craving then and pleasant feeling of love and hope. Unlike Camille, his father Sam was the embodiment of the power of dignity and kindness. Many women looked up to him. You bet, such a specimen of enormous stature, majestic and muscular with a body in relief. He had lived and worked in the circus since he was a little boy. Such a monumental man dared not offend. He could not even get into a conflict situation that would make him angry. No one argued with him. This giant was a soft and kind dad. Next to him, Stephen felt protected, and he grew up with absolute fearlessness in his heart. He grew up very brave because his peers in kindergarten and at school looked up to his dad with subservience. They showed Stephen every respect and honor. His father's authority was unquestionable. It was worth people to look at him, and they immediately understood what real power is. Almost 10 years. Life with him suited Camille. Although there was no mutual understanding between the parents, they often quarreled and loudly clarified their relationship. The father did it calmly and dignified, and the mother theatrically and without. So it seemed to everyone a complete hysteric. Stephen did not understand at all what normal man could live with her mother. Her feisty temper could only be tolerated because of her amazing outer beauty. Camille in her youth was graceful and well-built. You could paint portraits of her face. A light blush was always colorful on the delicate pink aviator, the girls framing it, delicate blonde curls. Camille's eyes were big and bright blue. Her nose was small and her lovely lips had a beautiful shape and pleasant fullness. Camille was now in her 50s, but she remained an interesting woman, a friend. She always told me that she enjoyed the attention of men. This was the real truth. Indeed, after her father, she had had many suitors, who pecked not only at her physical attractiveness, but also at her financial solvency. Stephen was used to having strange men show up at their house and then disappear. He didn't even bother to memorize their names. All these men seemed to him to be just background to his life, and cheap and of poor quality, something small and insignificant, not worthy of attention. None of these living characters could compare to the image of his tragically departed father. His departure happened quite unexpectedly and broke the whole destiny of a 9-year-old boy. One day, Sam went on tour with the circus. They were quite successful. That year, it was a dry, hot summer, and for some unknown reason deep in the night, most of the circus group members died in a fire. The performers had saved money on a hotel, and so they slept in caravans. From one of them, the fire spread to the others, and the hot flames spared no one. Only 2 administrators returned to their hometown, who did not skimp to spend the night in the hotel at their own expense. That was that. One afternoon, Stephen was left alone. Yes, he lived with his mother, but her attitude to her son was rather cool. Therefore, after the death of his father, the boy could not find anywhere that blessed source of unconditional love, which accepts the whole person and forgives him imperfections. Stephen would have liked to remain an open, brave, and kind boy, but circumstances did not allow him. His mother demanded that he stop being a sissy, went all the way, and with others behaved harshly. And all the peers, who subserviently ingratiated to him during his father's lifetime, now became insolent and insolent. They had been taking revenge on Stephen for years for Sam's strength. They laughed, they called him names, they beat him. At first he tolerated it, but then he became embittered and defensive, and showed his classmates his rage all at once. He didn't have to be friends with anyone else, but they stopped touching the boy. There was a big scandal at school when he bit their hands like an animal. He was stigmatized at meetings and councils, but no one wanted to understand the true motives behind the child's behavior. No one ever recognized that he was beating his teeth into the hands that had repeatedly stabbed him. No one ever realized that it was an outburst of humiliated boyish ego. After this incident, Faber Jr. was enlisted in the category of vicious bullies, but he did not make excuses to anyone. It was to his advantage. Finally, his classmates would leave him alone, afraid to avoid him. As always, people bowed their heads to boldness and strength. Stephen liked being alone more and more. He consciously chose silence. The boy rejoiced when classes were over and ran home with pleasure. There he would immerse himself and enjoy the solitude. His mother was always late at work, but even if she came home early, she was rarely interested in her son's affairs. All her questions were superficial, and she never listened to the answers. Camille was fantastically engrossed in her life. In the evenings, she and her girlfriends liked to go to restaurants, have another glass of expensive champagne or dabble in brandy, then spend time with a man and leave for an all-nighter with her beau at a hotel, or bring the Playboy home. Stephen spent all his free time on the computer. All his friends were on the other side of the screen. He loved the confined space of his own home and never went out. Camille had told her son explicitly that she dreamed of him living an independent life. And now, after he had dropped out of training, her hopes of getting rid of her own child soon were dashed. So she decided to lock him up. And Camille methodically sued her son for lack of a job. She strongly disliked his friends and girlfriends, although there weren't many. In the end, she gave him an ultimatum to either go to work for her firm or move out of the house to earn his own bread. Stephen was stuck in the office for over 2 weeks undergoing training. His mother strictly monitored it herself, sorting out his gaps in knowledge, blunders, and mistakes in practice. However, to her surprise, the woman began to notice that her son was rapidly advancing in the profession, had a good sense, and developed analytical skills. She did not wonder where her eyes had been before and why she thought the boy was an Ulyss. The woman was accustomed to extract her own benefit from any situation, so she immediately put her son in a responsible position so that everything would look rank in the eyes of inspecting organizations and in front of employees. Camille bought her son a fake diploma, and he officially started working. If in this son began to suit her completely, now she clung to his personal life, demanded to get a permanent lady of the heart, said that she wanted grandchildren. Stephen wondered to himself why she would do that. She rarely sees her son, and she communicates through the lip. And here are grandchildren. Probably her friends have made their own. She's got nothing to brag about. Stephen introduced her to two girls from the office. He said that he was friends with these young ladies and that they worked for her. Camille met them for a long time, explaining that these pseudo ladies are not suitable for the role of his girlfriends at all. Stephen began to avoid such conversations, but his mother became more and more insistent every day. The boy was discouraged by her pressure and constantly invented excuses to run away from home. He could not tell his own mother that it was her example that had formed his disdain for women. He looked upon them only as objects for the fulfillment of his intimate needs. Stephen thought they were all mindless dolls. It did not even occur to him that girls could be interesting individuals. The prospect of a marriage relationship in general made him giddy and twitchy. He remembered for the rest of his life how his father suffered, how he wanted to be independent of his wife's whims. But his mother had blackmailed him, using her son's responsible attitude and guilt. The only things Stephen held dear in this world were professions and the personal freedom of a girl he did not cling to by means of charm, intelligence, or modesty. He paid attention only to physical data, evaluated the figure, height, breast size, curves of the body. The guy did not even imagine that such a lady would be with him constantly every minute, irritate him with her rank. He had set a boundary of socializing with women, right from his bed. They were headed out the door. Stephen loved solitude and did not tolerate even his mother's presence around him, and strangers were out of the question. But one had to know Camille to realize she would not stop until she got the desired result. It was not necessary to wait long, because she herself decisively organized a date for her son with the girl she liked. Stephen decided not to contradict his mother in order not to create a conflict situation. He agreed to this play. In the shower, of course. The guy was furious, or his mother's wave of rage. And how was it not to be indignant? This woman had given complete oblivion to his childhood years and now brazenly invaded his private life. She's the right woman for you, Evelyn. Recently moved to our neighborhood, well-to-do parents, but she's so eager to live on her own. I found her a house a few days ago, not far from ours for rent. I've been in touch with her family. They're our equals. I've known her mother since I was a student. Emily was one of the nicest and most well-mannered girls at the Institute, and if Jenna's the name of the girl is anything like her mother, and I'm pretty sure you'll like her. Stephen was nervous about his upcoming meeting with this young lady and resented the match. There's no point in inviting her over. She'll be embarrassed. We'll talk on neutral territory, Camille suggested. It was her mother's decision. Stephen wondered very much how she had managed to let the situation out of her control. He sighed with relief and nodded in agreement. Jenna picked him up. The next evening, Stephen left the house. In a shallow glimpse of rain, he saw a silver open-top Chevy pull into the driveway. The car wasn't new, but it looked solid. A bright brunette with a boyish haircut jumped out. Leather jacket, dry red pants, and a turquoise scarf around her neck. What looked like cowboy boots and bright cherry lipstick. She slammed one hand on the hood. With the other, she dutifully obeyed. No, this girl was not cultured, quiet. Straight back, swift gait, confident look, pretty mouth and round aching chin. A graceful nose. Stephen felt a power emanating from this social lady. She gave him a firm hand and manfully squeezed his fingers in her palm. I suppose you know my name. She turned to Stephen. That's right. You do, he smiled. A sly expression appeared on Jenna's face. Well, I know all about you from Camille. Worthless, weak-willed, in need of constant attention and feminine care. That's how she characterized her own son. Stephen came closer to the girl, put his arms around her waist, and pressed her against him. My mother was so busy with herself that she didn't even notice how her son grew up, became a man without her participation. That's why the picture she has in her head doesn't match reality at all. Yeah, I'm a lone wolf. Yes, I'm a lone wolf. I'm not made for sentiment. But I know how to communicate with women, and you will have the opportunity to make sure of it. Laughing guy in the face of the command. The girl was not embarrassed and did not pull away. She calmly endured direct eye contact with him, and even smirked slightly. When Stephen let go of Jenna, she walked around the car, leaned over to the control panel, and performed some simple manipulations. Immediately, the top of the car tilted up. But then let's get away from this house and into the wind, the girl suggested. Stephen opened the doors in front of her, and then sat down in the comfortable chair next to her. That's a hell of a car you've got. How long has it been yours? Evelyn's been asking for about a year. My girl's a fire. And she got into a long conversation about battery valves and gasoline prices. What made Stephen realize he was a passionate car enthusiast? I've been having trouble with the open top, keeps coming down at the worst possible times, just like a pain in the ass. The girl continued her monologue. Before breaking down, there is a peculiar sound. I stop the car and strengthen it manually. Behind the conversation, Stephen did not notice how it began to blow his nose, and the sky was covered with steel clouds. It looks like we need to look for a secluded spot. It's getting darker by the minute. It looks like it's going to rain. Stephen turned to the girl. I know a cozy place. Let's go. Evelyn put on the gas. She drove Stephen to a restaurant on the other side of town. A few steps from her house, the parking lot employee grinned into his mustache. As she helped the guy open the car door, it jammed shut. Stephen felt as if the girl was patronizing him. It caused some awkwardness, but at the same time it felt good. Stephen had grown up in a deficit of care and could therefore appreciate its manifestations. He lifted his head up, and at the same moment streams of water rushed down from the sky. The young men ran toward the restaurant. Half darkness reigned there, and a snowy melody poured through the hall. The bartender looked sympathetically at Jenna and Stephen. He gestured with his hand to call them to follow him. In the back room, the guy handed them 2 strong towels, and they wiped their damp heads. The bartender smiled affectionately at the girl. You're adventurous as always. Stephen realized that Jenna and the young man had known each other for a long time. Well, yes, it's me. The girl laughed. All 3 of them returned to the hall. Evelyn approached a vacant table in its depths. Come here, she whispered toward Stephen. He walked toward her, and she pulled him toward the table. There they sat across from each other. Soon a waiter approached the couple, and they placed their order. Or rather, Evelyn made it. She was very attentive to Stephen, and it seemed to him that it was not Camille, but she herself who had taken the initiative to get acquainted. Jenna quickly understood his tastes and predilections. She took a quick look at the menu and decided what he would drink and eat. What she chose, surprising, was her preference in alcohol. In large portions, she devoured Jack Daniels, and Stephen picked up a bottle of collectible red wine. It was immediately obvious that Evelyn was a regular at this establishment, because all of its employees were eager to please her, plowing around like moths. Suddenly, Stephen realized that the society of this girl was very pleasant to him. He did not let himself be broken by his mother, did not succumb to her influence. But Jenna's strength is soft, quite different. She was attentive, showed great interest in the life of the guy, and unobtrusively cared. That's the payoff. Stephen asked her to tell me about herself. I was surprised at how interesting the girl's fate was. She was a little older than him by more than 2 years. She was born into a well-to-do family, but early on she wanted independence, so she started her own business several times. The initial capital was allocated to her by her father, but the first attempts were unsuccessful. He failed. Now I'm doing just fine. She smiled, taking one sip of whiskey after another. It was amazing, but Jenna had become a successful businesswoman. She owned several fashion magazines. This girl was obsessed with everything. She passionately talked to Stephen about the intricacies of her profession. And then, feeling that her narration bored the interlocutor, told the guy about her hobbies. They were somewhat extreme. Hiking in the mountains, racing on kayaks on raging strong rivers, swimming in forbidden places. Stephen could only wonder that his new acquaintance was not into space travel. At the end of the evening, he was fascinated by the girl. Her determination, courage, and faith in her own strength could be envied by any man. He was afraid to admit to himself that the girl had touched his heart. Jenna was different from many others. She was interesting to be with. Among many charming, intelligent, and beautiful women, she stood out. There was in her some kind of mesmerizing mystery. Next to this girl's soul arose some inexplicable awe. Wanted to drown in a relationship with this reckless representative of the weaker sex. Stephen caught himself at the thought that all his previous romances did not cause him the desire to open up and behave relaxed. They had been smooth, unremarkable encounters with a slight tinge of lust. How many of them had been such arousing his quiet interest? Dozens, hundreds. In general, Stephen was driven by a single desire to add to his collection of men. By and large, these were women who were completely alien to him. Jenna, on the other hand, had managed to become his own for the evening. He didn't want to part with her. In all, her appearance distorted such inner confidence that she involuntarily attracted looks from the outside. But that wasn't what attracted a man. I have not seen such beauties. With amazement, he caught himself at the thought that he admired her swift gait, radiant smile, manner of gesticulating. Stephen watched with awe the new feeling that was budding in the depths of his soul. It was an attractive one. The condition was unusual for him. It bathed him in cocktails, excitement, involvement. The guy couldn't understand at all what was clinging to his dictates. It was something inexplicable. He'd only met her today, but he'd immediately accepted all of her as she was. Now it seemed to him that he had known her for years. This was the way she was his own. He felt no shadow of embarrassment or discomfort in her presence. Stephen realized that he was completely relaxed around her. Literally, within hours, he realized that this was his woman. Not once did he get bored while talking to her. Not once did he think about business or anyone else. Evelyn, really absorbing all of his attention. At the same time, the girl was not intrusive and did not claim adoration or love. Stephen realized that in front of him was a completely independent person, and whatever their relationship in the future, he would not be able to own her completely. Jenna would always have her own world, hidden from everyone else, only at her own will. She will open the doors to it briefly and only to a select few, but will never fully let anyone in, ever. Not because she does not trust, but because it is her way of life, the need to have that very soulful island where you can freely enjoy your own fantasies, dreams, and reflections. "Let's date," Stephen suggested. "Girls." "Seriously," she laughed. "Yes, I think we're right for each other. Or maybe I'm wrong," he asked. "No, it seems that way." Evelyn looked at him point blank, and then Stephen felt a languid, passionate feeling enveloping him. Despite the fire of desire that had enveloped him, he remained outwardly calm and cold. Jenna looked at him with her marvelous velvet brown eyes, and Stephen read understanding in them. The girl silently rose from the table, and he followed her. The rain had stopped outside, and the city was illuminated by the last rays of the setting sun. They raced in her limousine through the empty streets. Then a thick purple twilight descended upon the land. The couple entered a posh house with no one inside. Evelyn led Stephen into her bedroom. The room was in semi-darkness. She turned on only one night light, offered him a shower, and after he heard herself disappear into the bathroom, she came into view. Stephen, about 10 minutes later, and without false fuss, threw off her towels. The boy followed her example. He admiringly looked over her slender young body, then boldly approached her and enclosed the girl in an embrace. Even in intimacy, she did not belong to him completely. He then slipped away, then hot, then cold change of her emotional states, surprised and turned the guy on at the same time. He really wanted to possess her in every way. But even after he had possessed the girl and was left with the feeling that Jenna did not belong to anyone, Nevertheless, he enjoyed being with her immensely. She knew what men wanted and knew how to enjoy intimacy with them herself. The girl easily gave him her body, but she wouldn't let anyone near her soul. Well, he pondered, so be it, but she's the most amazing woman I've ever met. Yes, I realize there will always be a distance between us. This is a woman who is a loner by nature. And of course, she'll never be my wife. She just won't want to lose her freedom. But I won't force her. Let her be with me only as long as she wants to be with me. She'll leave. It'll hurt, but I'll let her go because I realize Evelyn is a free bird. And no shackles, not even the greatest love or passion, can keep her from flying solo. And now he enjoyed any communication with the beautiful girl, her gaze, not arbitrary body movement, languid sigh, and next to her the whole world remained somewhere behind. Stephen was immersed in that unchanging mystery of being when he and she were alone together. They were united by a strong attraction. Stephen could not regulate his communication with Evelyn. The place and meetings were always chosen by her herself, and he only waited to listen to the roar of the engine of her Cadillac. The guy waited and prepared for every date with her, so the feeling he harbored for the young woman was a pinch of longing. He realized that someday this connection would suddenly cut off, and he would lose forever. She overshadowed all his other women, became that fatal beauty, next to which it was impossible to hook up even one innocent affair. The other ladies lost to her from the beginning because they dissolved in the shadow of her charisma. She was too bright and wonderfully nun-like. Evelyn's relationship was passionate, and at the same time, there was a certain detachment between them from each other. The girl often plunged into her inner world and revealed to the guy only some of her qualities. Therefore, Stephen sometimes felt abandoned and lonely. Sometimes he had no information for weeks about what his beloved was doing, but he bore it stoically. It was ready to tolerate everything for the sake of a couple of dates with her. Anticipation about the end of their relationship constantly tormented the soul of the man, as if he stood on a slippery stone in the middle of the raging elements and was afraid to fall. But the tragedy that occurred in life was more terrible than all his fantasies. It literally tore his soul to shreds. Stephen certainly knew that his woman had other men, and she often spent time with them. But the horrible revelation was that Evelyn was on drugs, and had been for a long time. Throughout their entire relationship, he had never noticed any signs of it. This sad circumstance determined the final chords of their love. Once again, Evelyn disappeared for a long time, and she was found breathless in a city hotel room. The cause of death was a drug overdose. Stephen was running around like a wounded animal. He wasn't ready to let Jenna go, not for good. He hadn't intruded into her world while she was alive, but to lose her irrevocably. No, it was beyond him. This tragedy had transformed Stephen from a young boy into a mature man. He had no friend or family shoulder to lean on during this difficult time. He experienced personal misfortune all alone, and it broke the lad's soul. He was still long stranger to the bottomless gaze, Jenna's velvet voice. Some nights he'd jump out of bed covered in vapors. He thought he could taste the sweet taste of her lips and the exultant scent of her body. In time, Stephen came to terms with it, but a ringing emptiness settled inside him. He began to fill it with alcohol and promiscuous sex. In the moment, when the man got drunk and indulged in flat successes with strangers, it seemed to him that the pain was going away. However, when he woke up in the morning, heavy emotions encompassed his soul in an even tighter ring. Stephen sank deeper and deeper into the abyss of drunkenness and debauchery. In this frenzy, he could not even properly mourn the departure of his mother, did not want to forgive her coldness and indifference, and he could not let her go to the next world with gratitude for his birth and all that she had given him on this sinful earth. The resentment remained in his heart. Stephen was fiercely angry at his mother and his beloved as if they were alive. The only thing that kept him afloat was business worries sobering the young man. As he labored in the office, he felt like a man wallowing in the pain of loss. Stephen realized that he was probably doomed to be alone. To meet someone like Evelyn again was impossible. He had given up hope of personal happiness. To keep from going mad, he was looking for new adventures. And now, with a swaggering, unsteady gait, he was walking through the city. Soft light poured in from the windows of the houses, and appetizing smells wafted through the windows. Somewhere a television was on, somewhere music was playing. It seemed to the man that there in the walls of these houses all people were happy, and someone needed them. He was in a hurry to get rid of this feeling and to leave the territory, where smelled cozy and happiness. Not because he was jealous, but because he was getting worse there. The man's hair fluttered in the wind, and he kept walking, unable to see the road. Out of the lilac haze of fog, a woman's silhouette appeared right in front of him, and he boldly went to get acquainted. The lady was beautiful and uninhibited. He stood in front of her and put his hand on her shoulder. The stranger did not even flinch, and Stephen felt better, for he felt the warmth of a human body. There was a gaping emptiness and an animalistic glint in the woman's eyes. He understood her without words, took her under his arm, and together they moved forward. At the inn, the night guest treated Stephen without resistance or objection. She gave herself to him. At 12 o'clock, he woke up in bed and found a luscious, hungover blonde beside him. His head split open, but he needed to get to the office, as he silently started to pack. The girl's face reflected bewilderment. "Were you paid to stay until 2? Let's stay together. We spent such a beautiful night." Stephen nodded silently. Overcoming the growing disgust in his soul was a mixture of guilt and squeamishness. He had experienced it when saying goodbye to random ladies. This condition was repeated every time. Stephen carefully concealed this attitude from his partners, but could do nothing about his own feelings. "I'm gonna shower and go to work. Will you leave a phone number?" the blonde asked. "Text me yours. I'll call you back." It was a phrase Stephen said to every woman he spent the night with, but he never called any of them back. Under the cool lines of the water, he came to his senses, but the munchies from last night were slowly wearing off. Feeling the degrees still playing in his body, Stephen decided to walk to the office. It was not far. He easily covered the distance of 1 block, but the day was heating up, and the hot August sun glared down on the young man. Stephen unbuttoned his shirt collar and walked over to the fountain. He realized that it would look rather strange. A successful businessman washing his face right in this urban facility. But right now he didn't care. Stephen walked over to one of the pounding water features and put his head under it, the illuminating currents doing their thing. He was immediately relieved and moved forward. In the public garden where the fountain was playing, not far away on a bench sat a girl. Passing by her, Stephen heard quiet sobs. Involuntarily, he turned around. The stranger was very thin and pale. Not a gram of makeup. Thin fingers of hands nervously passing pens. Textile bags full of tears. Big blue eyes. Stephen sat down next to her. "So, what are we giving here?" With a sneer, he asked. The girl flinched. The young man expected her to rudely answer him, to jump up from the bench and run away. However, she turned to him and often clapped her eyes. "You know, I am grateful to you for asking me what I am crying about. No one has asked me that for a long time. No one I know cares. They're all in a hurry. I think they're running away from their own and other people's problems. They don't want to empathize with their neighbors. It's like it's none of their business. It is easier to pass by than to get into the problem or help trustingly." The stranger shared with him. "Someone will say that you should leave your worries at home. But I have almost no close people. There is no one to ease my soul. One grandmother. She won't say no, she'll listen. But there are things I can't tell her. I'm afraid of disturbing her." Stephen looked at the girl with surprise and was amazed that she was so hasty in opening her soul to a stranger. He noticed that the stranger was very modestly dressed and realized her income was very modest. He did not feel sorry for the girl, but the situation was curious. Therefore, Stephen did not interrupt her, but listened attentively. "You know, I went around all the offices in search of a job, and everywhere rejected. no experience. And my grandmother's pension is not even enough for food. She's a sick person, even though she's keeping up. But she's a sick person. A lot of money is spent on medicines, and utilities have to be paid. But I can't help her at all. She raised me. She gave everything, lived for me. And I don't get a chance to thank her. I can't get a job. That's all. I have no strength left. I just sit and cry. She cried deeply again. Stephen looked at her more closely and thought that he had never made such an unusual acquaintance before. "And what is your education?" he asked philologically. "I just went to school to get a job. There's a gymnasium across the square, and a teacher was needed." Stephen scratched the back of his head, and an absolutely wild idea occurred to him, and he voiced it. "I need a secretary here. Oh, take me. I know the computer." The girl exclaimed hopefully. "Well, you're in luck. I am the owner of a respectable brokerage firm, and I can help. I think you are literate in this regard." "Yes, I have a red diploma." The girl rummaged through her bag and showed it to Stephen. He pretended to scrutinize it. "Well, I'll hire you if you want to," and the girl's eyes flashed genuine interest. "Really? Why? Am I really going to deceive inexperienced ladies?" At these words, the stranger blushed thickly. "I'm very grateful to you. You're just saving me." Her eyes are more important again. "But don't feel bad, Wendy." She stared at Stephen in surprise. "How do you know my name?" "From my diploma, actually. I showed it to her." "Oh, yes." The girl smiled trustingly. "But I have one condition," the man continued. "Oh, anything you want," the girl promised. And Stephen decided to make an experiment, to create a tempting situation for this young girl to see how she would react. He stood up and examined her from head to toe. And his type, of course. However, the girl's looks were pleasant, and the more he interacted with her, the more attractive he found her. Wendy had a lovely doll face with bottomless eyes, a dainty nose and pretty lips. She had stopped crying, and a delicate blush and charming round dimples appeared on her girlish cheeks. Stephen scratched the back of his head, then began to adjust the belt on his pants. "Well, anyway, you're going to have to do me an intimate favor. Well, right there in the office on your first day of work." After these words, Wendy often blinked her eyes. Her eyebrows rose up in surprise. "That's a must. But somehow I wanted to pay for everything in this life." "How did you put it?" "You don't have the money, so we'll take someone else's." Wendy was completely confused and insulted, jumped up from the bench, but then pulled herself together and boldly looked Stephen in the face. "Give me the address, please. I'll come to apply for a job. I'll be there. It won't cost me anything. We'll be able to provide for my grandmother and me." "That's right," he said. "Your salary will be good." Stephen gave the address of the office and said goodbye to the girl. He was sure she would change her mind, wouldn't come to work tomorrow. Some fleeting, joyful feeling, like sunlight slipping among the clouds, lighted up the man's heart, but it immediately disappeared into the depths of his dark thoughts. Looking at the man's receding figure, Wendy felt uneasy. How to go to him tomorrow? And why give herself to a stranger? She had no choice. The strength taken from years of hardship was running out. She and her grandmother needed a piece of bread. So Wendy had no qualms about the ordeal ahead of her. Of course, it was unpleasant. After all, she had never had a man before. But life had left her no choice. She couldn't sit on her grandmother's neck all the time. Wendy remembered her unhappy childhood. She'd once had a full family, a mother and father, and even a philosopher grandfather. A picture of him teaching her to read from a children's primer came to mind, on the porch of the village house. And then came this misfortune. Her parents had traveled with her to her grandmother's house, and there had been a gas leak. Only Vanessa and Wendy survived, thanks to the fact that they were sleeping in the far bedroom, window open. But despite this, they were also taken away from there by ambulance in serious condition. The doctors managed to pump the victims out, and then began a difficult litigation with the guardianship, Wendy wanted to take away from her grandmother because of her low income and advanced age. But the spirited woman fought to the end and won her granddaughter back. She realized that she could not give her a wide range of opportunities in life, but she could surround the little girl with warmth and love. And the woman did everything possible and even impossible to raise her granddaughter. Yeah, they didn't have much. Sometimes they even had to borrow food from a neighbor before the guardianship came. They both looked at them, drooling, but they couldn't touch them. And after the patronage of the social services, they took everything back. But they didn't want to part. Native people who loved each other, no one else could give them such happiness. And so, overcoming all adversity, they stayed together. Through ill health, Vanessa was engaged in lessons with her granddaughter. This made her a very good student. This allowed Wendy to enter on a budget. She remembered how she and her grandmother celebrated the occasion, with homemade wine from grapes that grew on their plot and fragrant strawberries from their own vegetable garden. It was small, but kept in perfect order. You bet, because they had been feeding from it for a whole year. They managed to grow potatoes, beets, potatoes, onions, dried apples from the forest for the winter. However, they had enough cherry jam to stock up on. Is 2 women too much to ask? Of course, Wendy wanted to have beautiful clothes and in childhood toys. But from a very early age, she realized that there was something more important than things. She treasured that warm and affectionate relationship with her grandmother, and she thanked God that she wasn't taken from her somewhere. Wendy was used to labor and discipline from childhood. Her grandmother's upbringing helped her to keep the best human qualities in her and always be herself. The girl knew that she was very strong, but now her soul was broken. Not every young shoulders could withstand the hardships she went through. However, the girl did not cry anymore, wiped the tears from her eyes, and decided that she would definitely go tomorrow to the office at the named address and do everything this paper man asked her to do. And then she would work faithfully. Wendy went to her home. She was in a state of confusion. The joy of finding a job had been covered up by a lewd offer from her future boss. The rest of the day flew by. To forget a little and shake off the unpleasant feelings, Wendy did all the chores around the house, whatever she could get her hands on. By evening, she was tired. I decided to call Grandma for tea. Anticipating the pleasure, she cut in half a loaf and abundantly smeared it with apple jam. Although here she put the impressively sized sandwich in front of her grandmother. Well, Grandma, do you want a hearty meal? Oh, that's what I mean. To live a life of pleasure, laughed Vanessa. Yeah, agreed Wendy. Now I'm going to shower, and I'll get in touch, and we'll go for a promenade before bed. The sun was sloping towards sunset when she and her grandmother went for a walk. They decided to walk all the way to the quarry. Not the nearest light, but pleasantly, reasoned Wendy. The rest of the day flew by. Wendy and Grandma loved these summer evenings. Easy for both of them. Walking along the forest road beneath tall pines, the quarry appeared in the distance, but already you could make out its dark Moldovan water. The crowns of the young spruce trees that had been planted near it a few years ago. Soon they approached it and started throwing small pebbles into the water from the shore. Imperceptibly, the lilac twilight thickened over them, and the travelers hurried home. They did not want to walk through the forest in the dark, but on the narrow forest road they met a very ancient old Bradshaw woman with a stick in her hand. "Would you say, sweetheart?" she asked. "There's a high voltage far out here." "We haven't heard of one," replied Wendy. As she got closer, the girl was able to make out the passers-by. She was about 80 years old, no less. "Oh my God. I've been reading too much. I think I'm lost. Where does this road lead to?" "To the city." "Where do you want to go?" Vanessa asked. "Oh, then I'm going the wrong way." The old woman fussed, turning back. Wendy looked up at the sky. It was only a little over half an hour before it was completely dark. "Wait, where are you going?" "There's no high voltage that way either. This road goes all the way to the quarry and ends there." "Where did you come from?" "From a cottage farm, from the forest." So I have a cottage there, and the live one is now in mine. So you're coming from there now with the forest. Vanessa mentally estimated the trajectory loomed decent kilometers. She marveled at the antics. But you won't make it back in the light. The forest is big, and in some places heavily overbolten. Only this road is rented by hunters, but it breaks off near the forest. People have often been confused in this area. They've even found human remains of travelers who lost their way in the forest and couldn't find their way out. Look, it'll be dark soon. You won't find your way back in the dark. It'll only get more confusing. Come with us, and in the morning you'll take the train to your place. It leaves around 800. The woman recovered a little, but then she agreed. On the way she said that she went to the forest from early morning and imperceptibly passing from mushrooms from berries. Berries deepened into the thicket for about 7 kilometers. And that's if you count in a straight line. One could only wonder at her vigor and physical endurance. At her age, I'm from the city myself, my grandmother said. My father used to live there, but we moved away a long time ago. I was a girl. My mother died early, right after giving birth. My father was 6 years old when he got married. Then he married a woman, and we went to live with her. She made an excellent stepmother. Not everyone can find such a mother. She was so nice. She's dead now, of course. God rest her soul. And my father's in the other world, and my husband has recently left. But I'm still living. 3 kids. God sent them. Good, caring ones. But they've gone to different cities. Such frankness of a random travel companion surprised Wendy, and she, herself, not understanding why, suddenly revealed to her companion all today's story that had happened to her in the park. Vanessa looked at her surprised, but did not utter a word of reproach. I'll tell it all out loud. The girl breathed a sigh of relief and felt as if a huge stone had fallen off her soul, interfering with her life further, spilling everything to a stranger. And she listened, nodding and mumbling to herself. During the conversation, they did not notice how they approached the town. At home, they took the grandmother as their own. And in the daylight, she did not seem so ancient. The women offered her shelter, a warm bed and hot tea with a loaf generously smeared with jam. The rays of light and the old woman's eyes were full of gratitude. After tea, she lay down and fell fast asleep. And on the morning before work, Wendy accompanied her to the electric train, comfortably settled in the carriage. Smiling grandmother in the open window waved goodbye to the girl, wrinkles in hand. Thank you, honey, that you did not abandon on the road. It's no big deal. You don't go into the woods alone anymore, do you? It's scary. You might not get any help. Thank you. I won't. I've had enough of walking. She smiled and suddenly added, and you, daughter, don't think that nothing just happens in the world. Go get a job. And that guy, don't be afraid. You'll do as he asked. Unexpected happiness will come into your life. Take my word for it. The train rumbled and moved off. At a loss, Wendy followed it. She forever remembered the kind, old woman's face and her shrewd, tenacious gaze. With 3 novelties, Wendy went to the broker's office. And what was Stephen's surprise when he saw yesterday's acquaintance outside his office. And she'd arrived before the office opened. Charming what? He thought. What am I going to do with her in terms of intimacy? And why would I want her? It's silly. Well, a young girl like that will be a wonder to me. Oh, hello, young one. He turned to Wendy. Honestly, I thought you weren't coming. You would have shown up sooner, though. Well done. But let's see how you do after you've checked in with HR, shall we? Let's go. He took her under his arm and led her into the office. Stephen felt her stiffen up, all wooden. Yeah, relax, he said. I'm not touching. Let's get organized. And by lunchtime, you'll be in my office, she explained. The girl raised her trusting eyes to him and nodded silently. Stephen noticed this time what beautiful, delicately furniture-colored hair she had had when they first met. It had been gathered into a ponytail, and now it fell loosely over her shoulders. It caused him to feel pleasantly under a cloud of sexual fantasy. Stephen walked into his office and immersed himself in his work. In contrast to his frivolous attitude towards the female sex, he went about his work in a collected and businesslike manner. He only broke away from it when Wendy timidly poked her pretty head in the doorway. Frankly, he had already forgotten about the girl. "May I come in?" she asked. "Oh, in time," he laughed. "I really am. I really want to, since you came, and we have a contract. In general. Let's do everything quickly and disperse. You're already registered in the personnel department." "Formalized," the girl answered fearfully. Stephen got up from his seat, walked to the door, and turned the key in the lock. "Well, hurry up and show me what you can do." Wendy began to slowly undress. "What's this?" Stephen's eyes rounded, and he stared in bewilderment at the knit pantaloons, small blue florals. "Lingerie," the girl answered bewilderedly. "From what grandmother's trunk did you get them?" The man just rolled with laughter. "No, my dear, they are not lingerie," he said, wiping tears from his eyes. "It's some kind of priority cling." He wrinkled his nose. "Look, go to work sometime. That's a very exotic outfit you're wearing." "I wanted something." He couldn't help himself and laughed. "I feel like I've undressed my grandmother. Go. I'm unilaterally terminating our contract. You're making me cry. Go ahead and don't take offense. But I'm really not mean." He often wanted to show off his sexual exploits to his buddies, but the pantaloon story suddenly became personal and untouchable. It was funny, but he didn't want to reveal it to any third party. Stephen caught himself smiling blissfully as he stared into space. "Good thing I have a separate office," he thought, and got to work. Wendy slipped out of his business suite and froze by the door. Complete confusion reigned in her soul. The girl didn't know what she should do. To be upset because she had caused Homeric laughter at the chief, or to rejoice that he had lost his desire for Polonsky like a tomato. She returned to her seat and tried to concentrate on her work. The next day, Stephen came through the reception area. He said hello to his regular secretary. Nancy was a beautiful lady with a mind-blowing figure, large breasts and round hips, hers colored in various light shades. Her hair was gathered on her head in such a ponytail. Her makeup was bright and professional. She sat by the computer simply, nodding her perfectly painted guesses at the keyboard. He glanced toward Wendy. She, too, was at her workstation. Meeting the chief's gaze, she all folded up and literally squirmed in her office chair. Stephen felt as if the fragile girl was about to disappear into space. "Hello," he said casually. "You could say congratulations on your first day of work. Yesterday was a baptism of fire." He smirked meaningfully, and the girl blushed. "I will." What questions he had for Nancy. She's in the business. "Nancy," he turned to the secretary. "You distributing the duties so that it's easier for her for now. What about you is more complicated. You understand, while she gets up to speed." Of course, Stephen performed everything to the best of his ability. "She's a girl. She's got a high typing speed. I checked it out. We have a lot of turnover. I'll just give it to her now, and I'll take care of the urgent stuff." "Nancy, what a clever girl you are," Stephen said with admiration. A satisfied smile stretched across the blonde's face, and Stephen entered his office and immediately forgot about both ladies. He was so absorbed in his work that he often didn't hear what was going on around him. When the man left the office in the evening, he found Wendy alone in the waiting room. "This is for you." Stephen pulled out of the bag several packages of expensive French underwear. "That these are normal underpants?" He grinned. The girl blushed thickly. "You what?" "I don't need anything." "Yes, you do. I saw it with my own eyes." "And what you have? Burn it. In fact, you know what? I'll give you a bonus. You go to closet, change your hair. You know, all that feminine stuff. And that's a must, of course. Otherwise, I'll fire you for sure." "Well, convinced," she agreed. While Stephen went down to the exit of the building, on his face waited a mysterious smile. But it happened to buy underpants for the secretary, not for his mistress, not for his wife, but just from the street. He shrugged his shoulders, but noted to himself that he was in an elevated mood. A week later, Nancy literally burst in on him with a perplexed look. She turned to the chief. "Stephen, but what a good girl. Indeed, her help is invaluable. But I can't get her to dress differently. It's such junk that our partners are horrified when they look in the waiting room." Stephen took his head off the papers, and it hit him. The girl had absolutely no money, and he'd forgotten what he'd said about the bonus. "Nancy, I'll take care of this matter myself. Go to your office," he commanded. When the man left his office, it was already dark outside the window. It was the 11th hour of the night, and Wendy was still sitting at her desk in the same pose. "What are you doing here so late?" he wondered. "Yes, I wasted a lot of time while I was sorting it out, and the documentation needs to be done for tomorrow. So I stayed late," quietly whispered the girl. "And you diligently," grinned Stephen. "It's a pity only in the business sphere, in others not so much." He gave her a sly look. Wendy stood up from the table and mumbled embarrassedly, "Well, I've finished. Permission to go." "I'm not." Stephen said with ostentatious distinction that it was getting late, and such valuable employees I prefer to drive personally. "So please, mademoiselle, gentlemen, welcome to my private car." He theatrically gave the girl his hand, and she trustingly accepted it. Together they went downstairs. He opened the car door for her, and she settled into the front seat. The engine roared to life, and the crossover sped off. Wendy gave a startled gasp. "Oh, come on, Stephen. We're in town, not on the highway. You're telling me off. Tell me, please, what's the right one? Just a few days in the office, and I'm on the short end of the stick with the brass." And he laughed. "But since you're so brave, I'm sure you'll take my remark adequately." "Oh, and how to her remarks?" The girl got worried. Of course. Speak up. I'll fix everything." "Well, it is not on the documents. Do not worry," he calmed the girl. "It's on your appearance. You see how stylish Nancy is. You, too, need to tidy up your closet to match your business status. But we've safely replaced some of the old stuff. At least I hope so." Stephen glanced meaningfully at Wendy, and she lowered her eyes. "Come on, you're embarrassed in front of the chief, with whom you were one step away from an intimate moment." Remembering the situation, the man was in a playful mood. "So I haven't gotten Stephen's first paycheck yet to buy the clothes I need," justified Wendy. "But I can't wait for you to get it. It's in the accounting department, and I can't give it to you sooner. Why don't you and I stop by the convenience store and pick out something for tomorrow anyway? Nancy's been buzzing around. It's a distraction from work." "But why would you want to spend so much money?" asked the girl. Wendy exhaled tiredly. "Stephen, but let's go in private. Call me Stephen. That's one. And two is let me decide for myself, unnecessary or not unnecessary. Not for me. Why don't you cut the crap and wear it normally? And then we'll decide about this money, all right?" Wendy nodded in agreement. Stephen led the girl to a boutique with very expensive clothes to her questioning and indignant look. He had already prepared the necessary arguments. "I run an expensive firm and my secretaries have to be dressed up. Accordingly, you may not blink your lovely eyes. I don't accept any objections. Girl," he called the sales girl, "would you be kind enough to match my girl's strict office bow?" He glanced contentedly at the remote Baroque lady, then took a seat on the plush sofa and began leisurely digging through his phone messages. When Wendy came out of the prime, paid again, and business attire, he gave a contented thumbs up and calmly said, "Well, that's what I wanted. Just perfect. Now you look appropriate to your status. Thank you." He turned to the girl serving them. Then he paid for his purchases and drove Wendy home. She got out of the car with a happy smile and thanked him for the purchases. "Well, let's go. It's getting late, and there's a lot of work tomorrow. I did it not only for you, but also for me. Good night." He drove off, flashing his headlights for her. After driving a few meters away, Stephen stopped the car and wondered inwardly. In him woke up such a mischievous boy who seemed to sleep for many years. The man realized that he liked these feelings very much, and they were directly related to Wendy. Communicating with her gave him great pleasure. And today, he could hardly hide his admiration when she came out of the premiere. Totally refreshed, he could not show his admiration for her, for he himself had not yet realized what a pleasant and joyous state of mind was entering his life. To Stephen, this feeling was absolutely new. The memory of greatness was still alive in his heart, but it was somewhat detached, and often that coldness gave them away from each other. Love for her had not warmed his heart, nor had it evoked such intoxicating warmth and joy as was now developing in the man's soul. These soft currents of magical feelings were rolling over his whole being. He wondered to himself where it came from in him and why it felt so good now. What was this miracle that had happened in his destiny? After all, Stephen could not even suppose that this young girl would catch his eye. The man even felt a slight pang of jealousy because he imagined what a dazzling impression Wendy would make tomorrow morning, and many men would throw interested glances at her. The next morning, he found Wendy alone in the waiting room. "You look marvelous. Transformed. I can't tell a story. I can't describe it. Just a different woman, I must say. Beautiful." As he opened the door to his office, he stopped and made a gesture. A thumbs up. "And this one, don't even doubt in the slightest that your fabulously good pantaloons burned." He winked at her. "Burned," the girl smiled. He sat down at his desk and couldn't gather his thoughts. Wendy, the image of her and the girl had followed him like an obsession. Some kind of illumination had settled in his soul, boyish moods and resentments of the past. The sorrows and tragedies receded into the background. She was so bright, cheerful, and sincere that next to her did not want to play the role of macho. And most importantly, Stephen realized that with her he was real, without social husks, and such a man liked himself more. And that in general he liked to enjoy life and be happy. He suddenly wanted to embrace this thin and defenseless girl, tenderly kiss her on the cheek and shield her from all the misfortunes of this world. Her purity evoked in his soul. Her purity evoked in Stephen's soul an extraordinary delight and faith in the best. If fate had sent him such a tender and unsophisticated devoted girl, it meant that she had given him a chance to free himself from the shell and enjoy the strong moments of life. He was delighted with this new joyous and pure feeling. But I was afraid at the same time. He started acting like a boy. In the office he was stern and severe with Wendy, and in the evenings he'd stand guard outside her house and watch her from the window of his car. He laughed at himself for turning into a young bully. With his money and status in life, Stephen realized that he was acting like an idiot. Just a short time ago, he had been a risky chucklehead and teased Wendy every day. Now it seemed from the outside that he was avoiding her. But for now, he couldn't help his inner shyness. He was also kind of embarrassed to show his feelings in front of the secretary and the blonde. After all, she had unwittingly witnessed their relationship. In such a suspended state, Stephen stayed for about 2 months, until Nancy brought him out into the open. Stephen once turned to her when she was bringing important papers for him to sign. "You're breaking yourself all the time. Is your attitude towards the new girl on your face? Is it readable by your behavior?" The blonde smiled slyly, which is clearly visible to everyone. Scared Stephen. "Well, not all of it. I could see the spark between a man and a woman right away. It's already aflame between you two. The man between us is dumbfounded." "You mean her?" "Stephen, you're such a tough cookie. And now you're just smeared. But get your act together and eventually ask her out on a real date. Without all the poking and prodding. You think the man scratched the tip of his nose. Of course, to an outsider, the situation is obvious. You like each other, and it's time for you to be together." Nancy's words made Stephen's heart warm. He thought that after his idiotic proposal in the park, Wendy was not serious about him, and certainly not considering him as a suitor. But the blonde was so encouraging to his boss that he decided to talk to Wendy alone that very evening. "Look, I want to spend some time with you. Right off the bat, He started at the end of the day. Yeah, Stephen, I'm ready. And Wendy had to pack a notebook and a tape recorder in her bag. You don't get it. I want a personal relationship with you. Oh, I'm not here equal. Equal or not, thank God, it's up to me. Let's give it a shot of hope. Stephen turned to her. What would it take? I'm inexperienced. Embarrassed the girl. Come on. You don't know. Your task is simple: to be yourself. Stephen smiled. But also to go out with me. What do you say? I don't know what will come of it, but it will be a curious experiment. Let's assume that we have a tentative agreement. And what will be our first date? The girl asked. I'll think about it, Stephen promised. He understood perfectly well that the standard scheme of seduction in the case of Wendy will not work. One could, of course, force her to sleep with him by blackmail. But that seemed disgusting to him now. The man sincerely wanted to like the girl for real. Days passed in his thoughts, and he noted to himself that his activity was not as vigorous as usual. Stephen was distracted all the time by thoughts of the girl. At the end of the week, he peeked into the reception area, without his permission. Nancy, sneaking out early, but he was glad she'd shown wits and some sass. Now he and Wendy could not be interrupted by anyone. Stephen walked over to the girl and stared at her for somewhat longer than usual. Wendy jumped up from her chair. Stephen, I'm not staying late today. I'm leaving. Just tidying up my desk. Yeah, I can see that. Good for you. You're getting the hang of it. Except I asked you to call me Stephen when we're alone. No, I'm gonna go by my first name in the office. What do you want to do? I was going to suggest something. Stephen's a little hesitant. I'd like you to accompany me on a walk. It's the weekend. We could spend it outdoors. I've been wanting to go to a walking park for a long time. They say it's very cool, all Russian-style bogaters. So I want to invite you to come with me. I'd love to, but I promised my grandmother I'd go with her. We haven't been anywhere in a long time. I wanted to buy theater tickets. I've been thinking about it. You know what? Why don't you invite her to come with us? I think a woman would be interested too. It's not a long ride in comfort. Oh, that would be convenient for you, Wendy. If they call me, it's convenient. I'll give you a day to think about it tonight, and I want you to call me tomorrow. I hope it's a favorable decision. Wendy called her grandmother with her, and Vanessa gladly agreed. Oh, this is so exciting, she told her granddaughter. After all, it's been a long time since I've been anywhere, much less traveled. Yes, it is curious to see your boss, Stephen, what he is like outside of professional communication. You know, Grandma, I can't understand him. Sometimes he's simple and kind, and sometimes he's weirdly avoidant. He pretends not to notice me at all. Well, trust me, in my experience. Wendy, are you deeply sympathetic to this gentleman? Come on, he's so rich, he has so many beauties at his disposal. Yes, my dear, affairs of the heart. They're not even capitalistic. Rich, not rich. Successful, not successful. That principle doesn't work here. You're young. Forgive me, granddaughter, and you don't have much wisdom. But I'll give you an example. He's the neighbor downstairs. You can't take your eyes off him. A handsome man. I saw women running after him before my eyes. They were ready to tie the shoelaces on his sneakers. A girl. A little redhead, still puny, but just classy. But he's talkative, and he loves her. Who doesn't look at the pretties? She's the only one he's ever wanted. So it's okay. They're good parents in their family. They cured 3 of them. It would seem that they're completely different people, and even after they cheat on each other, they stick together. I had a friend who was like that. Here's her story. When she was young, handsome Kim got tuberculosis. So one day he comes home with a voucher for recuperative treatment. And the next day a woman with charm, like a sin, meets the chief accountant with his work and starts thanking her for taking such care of her husband. Say, thank you for the allotted voucher. The woman's eyes in a pile, like a duck, a voucher. Never had one. Valka sprints home and goes into her husband's pocket and there's a treacherous bag of anger next to the voucher. Say, "I'm waiting for you, my dear, my beloved, in such and such a room with a NATO reception." Treatment of sexual recuperation. Gathering all his scorned honor in a fist, rushed mother-in-law in that sanatorium entered the room, waiting to separate from breakfast, and on the bed sees knitting, scarf, shawl under it. And there's a teddy bear from her mistress. Our Valia read outright. What love? What love? She sits, grieving, rubbing the umbrella in her hands. That's when the villain comes out. He meets his mistress, and he kicks his lawful wife in the legs. Forgive me, I'm not to blame. He came himself. Woman ball. But proud stepped over the prostrate body, not forgetting a couple of times to kick the rival on the head of the husband unfaithful, kicked her out on arrival, and then took her mother's advice to take her back. Who would want such a trained lady? And with 2 kids. Kim never got tuberculosis again, and there are plenty of such examples, my dear. And there are successful women and beautiful as dolls from head to toe, well-groomed, and at work honor and a tight purse. But there is no female happiness. Lonely. And for a woman it's right. She will not rest until she realizes herself as a wife and mother. That's our nature, so don't look at his wealth, and don't get scared. Act natural. Maybe he is tired of these capricious and rich kings and pulled the man to something real. You're guileless, and you're straight and beautiful. I'm the one with the granddaughter. You don't even need makeup. Everything about you is tender, soft, and feminine. Oh, thank you, Grandma, for your kind words. I believe you. I guess it's all true. How many heart-to-heart talks have we had with you? You've never been wrong once. Always right. It's not just intuition, it's logic. I'll tell you the signs, and you apply them to the chief and you'll know his intentions. Many young ladies often wonder about the attitude of their chosen one, whether he is keen and loves sincerely and deeply. If such questions disturb your soul, you need to analyze the actions of your partner. There are several aspects of a man's behavior by which you can judge his feelings. He notices the merits and often talks about them. He is really sincerely attached to a woman if he evaluates her comprehensively, admires the appearance, character, abilities, achievements of his chosen one. He notices not only beautiful legs, but also a sharp mind, kind disposition, a subtle sense of humor, the ability to support in critical moments. Often admires a woman. He looks at a special, not oily, full of passion eyes, but warmly and with tenderness. Many men like to look at their favorites, furtively enjoying their beauty and grace from afar or while sleeping. But close eye contact does not strain them. They do not hide their gaze and do not look away. Sensitive to change. He always pays attention to a new hairstyle or outfit beloved. Subtly feels the changes in her mood and behavior. Generous on compliments and on praise. She positively evaluates the desire for development in the profession. Well, or culinary experiments in the home kitchen. He wants to be close. He lets the chosen one into his space, offers to meet on his territory, gladly shows his home, office, dacha, strives to spend with his beloved as much time as possible. He is comfortable in her society in a busy work schedule. A man like this will always find time. He will call or write a message. And if men prefer to meet in hotels or in the apartment, the partner comes up with a lot of excuses about communicating at home. Rarely calls and writes, so he is not in a hurry to let her into his life. He has to be patient. He's willing to wait for his lady. That goes for everything. Does the girl dress up for a date? Is she late for a meeting or pulling for intimacy? If a man is reverent about the chosen one, he does not rush her with important decisions. When a woman really hooked him, he will be patient and show patience, whether she is capriciously uncollected or not in the mood. Wants to be liked. He makes an effort to look good, pays maximum attention to his hair and clothes, chooses perfume carefully, wants to become closer in the spiritual sphere, so he is actively interested in the worldview, hobbies, friendship of the chosen one. When meeting, he shows gallantly, demonstrates his best qualities. He also values her opinion. If the partner plans a long-term relationship with his chosen one, he listens to her advice when choosing clothes and food. He discusses with his beloved creative projects and perspective plans, allows you to evaluate his actions, performances of movement. In a positive way, he perceives critical comments, and if he considers them fair, he avoids blunders in the future. He also shortens the distance. It is pleasant for him to be in the same space with his chosen one. Therefore, he will not build the boundaries of communication with her, and the desire to be closer is well traced at a random meeting. A loving man opens his arms wide. He smiles and begins to move towards her, not hiding his joy. But if he crosses his arms on his chest, scratches the back of his head, and his smile looks strained, the presence of a lady is not part of his plans. With his entire appearance, he will make it clear that meetings are better planned and limited in time. He demonstrates his achievements. He gladly shows his beloved all the merits of his life. A special disposition and trust are indicated by those cases when a man offers his lady to use his phone, tablet, put on his shirt, try on sunglasses, sit behind the wheel of his favorite car. He spares his beloved's feelings, twiddling his thumbs. He tries to avoid conflicts or situations that upset the chosen one, will not play on her weaknesses and pain points. The first to initiate reconciliation at a rift will stop a protracted dispute. He is sensitive to the tears of his beloved, so he will always embrace her, will calm her down. He will not allow strangers to hurt the feelings of his partner. You know he is ready to change his lifestyle. Here, if a man is interested in a woman, he will roll mountains for her. He will replay plans, take an extraordinary vacation. If necessary, he'll come in the middle of the night. And if there are no feelings, he will come up with 1,000 obstacles to deny her a date or help. The partner of the one has full information about the interests, hobbies, and tastes of the woman he loves. He knows what books she reads, what wine she drinks, what genres of movies she prefers, her favorite flowers and perfume. Without serious intentions, a man's interests are limited to the framework of sexual relations. He easily forgets about things that are meaningful to her. He is sincere and frank. A successful man wants to see in his chosen one not only a beloved, but also a friend. He will trust her with his innermost thoughts and dreams. He will willingly tell about childhood offenses, favorite hobbies, relationships with parents, friends, colleagues. He is honest with the chosen one. If the truth can hurt her, he would rather keep silent than deliberately lie. Includes in the plans for the future. In conversation, a man begins to operate often with the pronoun we. He no longer speaks of himself in the singular person. Now it sounds more often we will decide, we will see, we will think, we will come. So he subconsciously demonstrates readiness for a joint life with the chosen one. By the way, he is attentive in intimate relationships in intimacy. He tries not only to satisfy himself, but also to reveal the possibilities to his partner. First of all, to make it pleasant for her. After the end of intimacy, he does not withdraw at all, but maintains bodily contact. He is open to hugs and touches. He is ready to change for the sake of his beloved. And if a woman is dear to a man, he can give up the most bad habits and will control himself. In order to please her, he will share her hobbies. He will tolerate her friends and relatives, even if he does not like them. He shows care. Serious attitude to a woman is manifested by a desire to help her, that is, to be useful to her. The man is responsive to her requests and zealously takes up the solution of any, sometimes insignificant problem situations. Sacrifice personal time and professional interests. You know he doesn't tolerate competition. He wants to be the only one in his beloved's life. Becomes irritated at the sight of potential rivals. He can't stand comparisons with other men. He is satisfied if he manages to make a good impression on the chosen one and is the first to give her support. He likes it when a woman consults him when making important decisions. She values his point of view. Next, he takes care of the expenses. A man is not in a hurry to pay for a partner who does not interest him, but for his beloved, he will not spare anything. He is constantly invested in her beauty and health. pays for the election in restaurant stores, provides her with a decent life. This is very important for him. Be a leader in the material sphere. Show willingness to take on any financial obligations of the beloved. He is not afraid of responsibility. He willingly tries on the role of the head of the family, is ready to make important decisions and implement them, voices a desire to marry, become a father, takes care of his loved ones, introduces his parents and relatives. When a man decides to take this step, a woman can be sure that his intentions are the most serious. She is the only contender for his heart. He will gladly get acquainted, and with her relatives will try to make a pleasant impression on them. He is eager to take the relationship to the next level. A man interested in a short sexual encounter. He constantly comes up with some ridiculous excuses, preventing the reunion. And if his intentions are serious, he moves the relationship along. After meeting his parents, he offers to come over. And then he proposes. Vanessa finished and looked intently at her granddaughter. "How much is similar?" she remarked with surprise. "That's what I told you. So let's go, since we're invited. Besides, I can see you like him too. I don't understand him, but I can see he's got a good heart." "All right. Well, let's see the boss outside the office." The young woman laughed wickedly. The trip was indeed a pleasant surprise for them. On the road, Stephen made a lot of jokes. He was alert. Wendy liked the fact that he did not ignore her grandmother's wishes. It seemed to her that the chief became sympathetic to Vanessa. So, in casual conversation, they reached the place. Before their eyes spread out a huge natural park with powerful paths, with majestic towers, castles, fortresses, and shuttles between them, corridors and carts. The charioteer gave a few hundred and got to any object with a breeze. And in the center of the cultural site, on a high mountain, stood the majestic figure of a new serpent, which at the appointed time spewed out streams of fire. The travelers visited all the art objects they liked, had lunch in a stylized Korchevnikov's, admired the final exit of the old Russian dragon, bathed in the local river. In general, they were satisfied. Happy and tired, they went on their way back. Stephen was jubilant. Wendy had spent the whole day with him. She smiled, took him under her arm, and discussed her impressions. Vanessa, too, had made a favorable impression on him. He expected to see a decrepit old woman, but met a vigorous, neat woman. He could talk to her on any subject. With these two ladies, he felt at home freely and easily. He didn't even have to control his emotions or restrain his impulses. He too acted like a child and enjoyed the fabulous outing. In the late afternoon, Stephen delivered Wendy and her grandmother home and went to his own place. He was light and happy at heart. The man was content and caught himself thinking that he felt good about being able to give such a trip to the girl his heart desired. After this trip, their relationship began to develop rapidly. There was warmth, respect, and care. Stephen was thrilled to realize that Wendy also cared for him. It gave him so much energy that he felt as if he were not walking, but simply floating above the ground. Time passed, and gradually they grew closer and closer. And soon one remarkable incident occurred which enabled Stephen to be convinced of the correctness of his choice. When the city was covered with snowy winter and cold winds, forgot in its streets, he caught a bad cold, with a high fever and skinny chills gripping his entire body. At the height of the infection, he called Nancy and told her he would be gone for several days. The man's condition kept worsening, and soon he slipped into oblivion alone in the apartment, completely helpless. Stephen perceived the sounds of the television and telephone as if through a jenna of thick fog. He was no longer able to even stick a thermometer under his arm. The patient was losing touch with reality. The only one who sounded the alarm was Wendy. She convinced Nancy to give her a spare key to Stephen's apartment. It was kept in the study just in case. She rushed over to her boss's house. The girl was shocked by what she saw. She immediately called an ambulance, and Stephen was hospitalized. Wendy arrived at his apartment just in time, because the timely treatment helped him to avoid complications. According to the doctor, they were sure to threaten a man weakened by infection. Every day the girl visited the patient and made sure to bring fruit. And hello from Vanessa. Feeling her care and presence, Stephen recovered quickly. Soon he was discharged, although he spent another week at home. During this time, the man got so used to the closeness of his favorite girl that he did not want to part with her even for a while. He came to the realization that he would like to see Wendy as his wife. He needed her like air. On his return to the office, Stephen set to work with renewed vigor. He decided to propose to Wendy. The night before, the man left his office and approached her workplace. "Wendy, I need to discuss some work issues with you, but not in the office, but tonight at the Orpheus restaurant. I'd like you to be ready at 9 o'clock. I'll pick you up. Dress code. Parade objections will not be accepted." That's not a request. That's an instruction. Wendy was surprised at the way he spoke to her, but did not object. "It will be carried out to the best of my ability." "Not to worry," she replied theatrically, continuing to type on the keyboard. When they arrived at the restaurant, a table had already been set for them. Wendy had been with Stephen in various places before and was therefore surprised by the unusual service. In the middle she saw a beautiful vase with a voluminous flower arrangement. "You said it was a business occasion. Why flowers?" The girl was surprised. "And this you will find out later." "Mademoiselle," he slyly smiled. Then the wonderful voice of Paul McCartney was heard in one of the speakers. Stephen stretched out his hand to meet her and offered to dance. They twirled around the floor. Stephen gently embraced her and could not believe it was real. Sunny and warm vibes emanated from her. Wonderful hair spread across her shoulders. Her blue eyes glowed with happiness, and her body gave out desires. The song ended. He gallantly led her to a table. Wendy sat down. "You know," Stephen began, "I'm frankly admiring you right now. I don't think there's a more beautiful woman in the world. I'll tell you the truth. You're probably the only woman I have any genuine respect for. You know everything about me. I'm no saint. Sometimes I've been ridiculous and stupid. Yes, I remember your indecent proposal." Wendy laughed. "And I remember what you were wearing at the hour of our first intimate date." Stephen smiled broadly. "But I'm grateful to your outfit for drawing my attention to you. But the time has come when you are not shy of me at all, and I want you to be my wife." He opened his palm with a dainty ring hidden in it. "Well, I'm a saint. All that remains is to ask Vanessa's blessing." Wendy raised her matchless cornflower eyes to him, and he saw in them so much love and tenderness that his heart leaped with happiness. "Can you imagine? I agree. Because from the very beginning I couldn't refuse any of your offers, even from indecent." The girl squinted slyly. "That's the effect you have on me. You could say, hypnotically. I am ready to sacrifice all my principles and morals. Vanessa has long ago figured you out. 6 months ago, and you charmed her from the first moment you met her. So I take it that's a complete agreement." "That's right. You, Stephen, understand. Give me your ring." Stephen complied with his beloved's request, and on this occasion they drank 2 bottles of champagne, then had a delicious dinner and several times twirled in a slow dance. Stephen remembered how unsophisticated Wendy used to be, and he desired her more than anything else in the world. Very delicately and carefully, he was teaching her to open herself up to passion. But it wasn't even about intimacy. Although their physical union was getting better and better each time, Stephen felt in Wendy an absolute kinsman. This beautiful girl had found a place for him in her soul. She was truly his other half. Stephen felt responsible for a woman for the first time and did not avoid her. He was ready to fight back hard for encroaching on his girlfriend's insecurities. No one in his presence would offend Wendy by word or deed. She was completely under his protection, and it was from her that the man felt a mental and physical togetherness that could only be dreamed of. How had this girl managed to win him over? He did not understand. What fascinated him was Wendy's sincerity and selflessness. She really gave Stephen the kind of attention and care that he had dreamed of as a child and received only from his father. Only now in this affair with Wendy, he realized that Prochor had managed to plant in him his best life principles. So he valued simple human values, mutual love, respect, sincere care for each other. A difficult childhood and frivolous youth pushed all this into the background and replaced it with phantom attachments. But neither success nor money could make Stephen happy. Only his relationship with Wendy had brought harmony and peace to his soul. Only now he realized what a pleasure it is to live in balance with himself, when not passions tear your soul, but tenderness and delight. They fill it all around. Nature, people, and everyday affairs become completely different. The very perception of the world changes. Stephen looked at her now with gratitude. Yes, it is not an easy world, and it is not simple, but it is what it is. When the fire of true love burns inside you, then philosophically perceive the difficulties and vicissitudes of life. Indulge in other people's shortcomings goes irritability, nervousness, using sometimes envy of other people's happiness. Stephen now realized how much good lurked in his soul, and there was no one to give it to. In fact, no one was taking it. And Wendy really needed his care, attention, and adoration. Her adoring gaze reflected her love for him. She must have sensed something real that had always been hidden in him. The girl trusted Stephen so infinitely that to deceive her, he could not deceive her. He realized clearly that Wendy was the cornerstone through which he had come to love life itself in all its incarnations. With her, he had discovered one immutable truth. He was giving himself to her and deriving great pleasure from it. Next to her, he became the real, the very sincere and desperate boy in whom his father had infinitely believed. The morning they met together in the large and bright bedroom, Stephen opened himself even more to Wendy. Putting his arms around her, he said, "You do not even realize how amazing you are, outwardly seemingly weak and fragile, but at heart strong and kind. You're the one who made me a better person. And that's not just a buzzword. It's the truth. I not only fell in love with a beautiful woman, but through you I became real. I got my self-respect back. Gone are the resentments, the fears. Through you, I've come to love the world. I have no complaints about it. It's given me such happiness. You have no idea how good it feels to be with you. I can't explain it to you, but I can show you." And he brought it to her lips in a passionate kiss. After a while, their private life became such that Stephen was breathtaking. For this, he was grateful to Wendy. She enjoyed learning all the intricacies of a close relationship between a man and a woman. Stephen sometimes became wildly frightened that he could pass it by. That and sobbing on the bench curls. He thanked God and fate that by some instinct he had seen the gorgeous woman hidden in this humble poor girl. Wendy had turned out to be a splendid wife. She was not afraid to quit her job and become a housewife, organizing everyday life and recreation for her beloved. Brought her great pleasure. The woman did not regret this step, because one by one they had children, a healthy, strong boy, Rick with the same marvelous eyes, just like their mother's, and then a searing brunette with clear brown eyes, just like Daddy. They say girls who look like their fathers grow up happy, and vice versa. Boys who are lucky enough to inherit their mother's looks also become lucky. Stephen felt perfectly at home as a husband and father. He felt at ease, actively realized in the professional sphere, and was the main provider in the family. Even in his strict schedule, he was sure to allocate time to communicate with children when they grew up. On an equal footing with his wife, he attended parent-teacher conferences, participated in school life, took them to sections and additional classes. Vanessa lived to see his great-grandchildren and had time to nurse them. This kind woman passed away at the age of 90. Her soul departed peacefully to the kingdom of heaven in her sleep. During her lifetime, she refused to move in with the young and remained in her old home. Stephen did his best to make it more comfortable and sympathetic. He showed her respect to the end of the woman's life and considered her a kindred spirit. Thanks to his personal happiness, he was able to let go of his resentments toward his mother and remember the isolated moments of happiness she was able to give him. Celebrating the anniversary of their acquaintance, the Faber family recalled the incident of the indecent proposal and all the consequences that followed. A grateful heart now beat in Stephen's chest. He had grown to love the rain. One day, he came out of the office and realized that a downpour was about to break out. The scent was hard to describe. It smelled, especially of variety in foreign lands, and intensified with every minute. A lightning bolt flashed, like a flaming branch in a fire. It was followed by thunder. Droplets swiftly approached the ground and bombarded leaves, flowers, and grasses. Music was playing in my head. Stephen looked at the rain and saw a miracle. He admired how the raindrops gently touched the delicate greenery and tenderly, but washed away the flowers and hid in the thick grass. A heavy rain filled the street. It was in moderation, moving in rhythm and ringing. The August rain is young, and he cannot understand the wisdom of autumn. Men invite his youth and realized that he himself had entered the season of wise maturity. Stephen felt like raising his arms towards him and shouting to be heard. I'm a happy man. I feel crazy good. I love and am loved. Suddenly, the sky brightened, and the sun appeared from behind the clouds. Stephen, satisfied with the games of nature, and himself looked around and was pleased with the result. It seemed to him that the trees were younger and the flowers smelled sweeter. He looked up. The clouds were flying away, slowly turning into intricate shades, and a bright star named the sun lit up. And we will wait for the pure world. Subscribe and click the bell.
William Peterson nodded and glanced at his watch, thinking Kelly hadn't called. Hadn't there been time all day? The night shift had not been easy. 3 surgeries was no joke. The man felt like he was a goner. Abruptly standing up from his chair, he took off his robe, cap and all carefully hung in the locker. Once dressed, he looked around the office once more, corrected the folders with documents. He got up, caught on his cell phone, and went out. Surgeon of the highest category Kotovsky liked it when everything lay neatly in its place. Passing the resident, he shouted to colleagues, "I do not have a quiet duty." And going down the stairs, again looked at the clock. Where's Kelly? The alarm beeped. He was about to open the car door. He was called out of breath, by a nurse. William Peterson. Hold on. There's a major multi-vehicle accident nearby. All the victims are being rushed to us. I can't handle a large number of casualties alone. And with both ORs prepped and the car closed, the man hurried back to the clinic. People needed him. It was already the second day the doctor was on his feet, and it was unknown when it would be over. 21 people were admitted to the hospital. Of course, not everyone made it to the operating room. And as they say, thank God, most of the nurses made bandages and determined in the wards. When the doctor arrived and changed his clothes and entered the operating room number 2, he saw a woman on the table. And when he looked at her face, he cried out in surprise. In front of him lay William's spouse, Kelly. He diagnosed several internal injuries, severe concussions, and a very bruised face. Without wasting a second, the vests went to work. 3 long hours the doctor labored and during this time stopped internal bleeding, did surgery on his leg, removed all the shrapnel from his face. But to be honest, it was even more frightening. It was clear to everyone that if she survived, plastic surgery would be required after recovery. At 5 o'clock, it was all over. 3 could not be saved. They died on the operating tables with injuries incompatible with life. Corver couldn't feel his legs or his back. And when he came out of surgery, William was waiting for him. I operated on your wife. What do you mean you operated on her? She was in a car accident. Forgetting his fatigue, he flew to the emergency room. Even with bandages and a disfigured face, he recognized his Kelly. The man couldn't hold back the tears. He loved his Kelly more than anything in the world. 18 years of married life, 2 beautiful boys, and love still. He looked at the gauges. While everything was working, his wife was unconscious. Kelly, love. How on earth did this happen? He asked, knowing no one would answer him. The driver of the truck didn't slow down on a curve and the huge truck skidded. It flipped over and crushed several cars, leaving no chance for whoever was behind the wheel. Kelly was already in the driveway of the clinic sitting relaxed, listening to music, and didn't even have time to react and slow down. As it turned out, on the hood, drinking out the windshield. The last thing she heard was the chords of a waltz. and then darkness and silence. William Peterson gingerly touched his arm, but he didn't even turn around. "William Peterson, get some sleep. I've put you in the study. No, I can't leave her. Don't worry, I'm fine." But finally, realizing that he was tired to the point where he could pass out at any minute, he agreed to go lie down. When he woke up 6 hours later, he scolded the nurse for not waking him up. "So your wife's still unconscious. How can you help her?" I was surprised to hear the nurse justify herself. "Yes, I guess you're right. Make some coffee, please." Well, she brought him coffee and a couple of homemade cakes, which the doctor swallowed without even noticing. "Maybe you should go home. Kelly's alive. If you need a consult, we'll be in touch." And to everyone's surprise, he agreed. Taking his bag, he left the hospital, which felt heavy with an atmosphere of despair and human suffering. Of course, the doctors kept the situation under control, but they were unable to give any comforting information to the relatives of the victims, who came to the clinic and now looked at the people in white coats with tear-wet eyes, pleading. There remained a swift wait. William Peterson showered at home, then called the clinic a couple of times in half an hour, but always heard the same answer. No change. Alive. The man put the cell phone down on the table and directed a blank stare at it. Suddenly the phone rang, making the man flinch. William grabbed the gadget, but his son's name popped up on the screen. "Dad, you're all right," he spoke, in a slightly worried voice. "Yeah, Mom, I can't get through. Where are you?" In a quiet, scary voice, Dad asked. "At the Institute. I'm going home. We'll find a mom and get together. Come to our place. I have something to tell you." When the children heard about the accident, the daughter's eyes widened with horror and instantly filled with tears. "She'll live." Barely audible, the girl whispered, "I can't say for sure, but we have to believe it. The doctors did everything they could. Her condition is stable, but she's not conscious. Now she has to want to come back to us. That's the only way her body will fight back." And he dialed the clinic again. "How's the Catalan doing?" "William Peterson. She's still unconscious." They answered him on the other end of the line. "In our case, we should be glad. At least her condition isn't getting worse," said William, disconnecting the phone. "But trust, of course, we'll be better off." The medical staff watched Kelly Makarova closely until the morning, but she never moved. Her breathing was shallow and infrequent, and her pulse was weak but steady. Consciousness never returned, and William Peterson began to fear the worst of the coma. By evening, he was back in the clinic and ready to start work. After the second operation came to an end, Corver went straight to the intensive care unit. But the nurse could do nothing to cheer him up. Unfortunately, there was no improvement, but no deterioration either, she said. She hated that William was moving away from the operating table like a man possessed. He walked into the resident's room. Couldn't be alone and the best among men. "Let me make you some coffee," the nurse offered, and the man nodded silently. Maria's daughter had put something in his bag that morning. As it turned out, it was sandwiches and 2 apples. He had no appetite, but he ate, realizing that he needed strength to work. Unable to find a place to sit, he went to the emergency room again. For a while, the man stood near his wife's bed, not allowing a close look with the device, and then lifted the eyelid of the right eye. But it was unchanged. Then he put a chair beside the bed, sat down, and took her dainty hand in his big soft palm and said, "To be honest, Kelly, I don't remember how long ago I told you how much I love you. Yes, I do. And I also couldn't do it without you. You should come back, stop sleeping. But you're not a sleeping princess. You're an energetic, creative person. I need you. Me and the kids need you. We miss you very much. Maria, without you, is hitting the sweet spot again, and only you can stop her." He ran his thumb along the inside of her palm. The hand warmed, as if life was being rekindled in it. But Kelly didn't react in any way to his touch. She just doesn't want to come back here, William thought, to the place where she'd been hurt. Dr. Corver should know about such things. In order to escape from pain and suffering, victims go so deeply into themselves that it can be difficult or impossible to come back. 3 more long days passed. William Peterson settled into the clinic. He could no longer tell if it was day or night. He spent all his time either in the operating room or in the intensive care unit. And now he was sitting across from her again, gazing into that dear, once beautiful face. But now she's not vital. Kissing her hands and talking about everything. William was just about to be despairing and suddenly felt her hand move. Not much, just a little bit, but it moved. So she can hear him, even though her eyes are still closed. "Good girl, honey, it's me, Will. Can you hear me? If you burned my finger." And oh my goodness, she squeezed. Oh, not so hard, my dear, you'll break it once." He laughed. "I adore you, my love. I await your return. Try to open your eyes. I know you want to see me too." Oh, I tried to lift her eyelids, but it didn't work right away because she had to return to this world as her husband asked her to. The pain immediately pierced her, and she wanted to go back to where it was quiet and nothing hurt. William Peterson realized that it hurt too much to comply with his request. Nina quickly anesthetized the painkiller. "I'm on my way." William Peterson. After the medicine took effect, she opened her eyes and saw this strong man crying. "I'm glad you're back with me. You're a fighter. I've always known that. Everything's gonna be okay now. I promise." William was always not only the soul of the company, but also in the family. He was the center of the universe. He could always make you laugh, encourage you, give you hope. For this he was loved, respected and trusted not only by his colleagues, but also by his wife and children. Children. How do they quietly ask Kelly? They're worried, they want to see you. I want to see them too. Later, my dear, they will surely come. And the car's pretty wrecked. Yeah, forget about that piece of iron. The main thing is that you're alive and you'll be well soon. I'm sleepy. Sure, go to sleep, dear. I'll come back later. And when he walked into the resident's room with a smile at all 32, everyone present realized what had happened. She's back with us. Thank you. And he shook his hand wider than that. A few more times he looked in on his wife, but she was asleep. It was only toward evening that Kelly opened her eyes again. "Hi," he said. "I'm glad you're back with me." She made an attempt to smile back at him, but immediately grimaced in pain. "How do you feel the same?" he asked, realizing it was a very stupid question. She wanted to nod, but looked up again in pain. "Head. You have a severe concussion and a small hematoma on the right side." He could see the anguish in her eyes. "I understand, Kelly, you are in a lot of pain," said the husband sympathetically. "They're going to give you some painkillers and you'll feel better." He stood up, walked over to the nurse and said half the usual dose. "Let him stay awake longer." The nurse nodded and went to the patient. In the evening, William Peterson went home. He had to check on the children, even though they were adults, but still the children were more already asleep, and he kissed her hand. "I'll be back in the morning, sweetheart." Kelly, I heard his words, but to open my eyes was no longer strong. It was hard to escape the morphine. And in the morning, when she woke up, she was surprised to find that her husband was beside her and smiling, looking at her with loving eyes. "Good morning." "Oh, darling." "Hello." He understood her lips rather than heard them. "You look much better today," he said. The woman didn't know what was wrong with her face. And William had no idea how to let me know about it. "By the way, the kids are coming to visit you tomorrow." William changed the subject. They'd had a long, hard conversation yesterday. The man explained that Mom still has to endure several plastic surgeries, that her face is disfigured. "But you must not give the impression you are future doctors. You know that the patient in any case should be supported, gives you hope. It's clear, don't worry, everything will be fine." They endured, and the father was proud of his children. But once Maria got outside the hospital, she got really hysterical. "Did you see that?" she screamed. "Yes, I'm even afraid to imagine Mom's condition when she sees herself in the mirror." Calmed his sister down as best he could. A month passed. The hematoma dissolved. Her head also ached. The cast on her arm was removed. The wound on her leg was gradually healing, but her face. It was the first time she realized there was something wrong with it. When her hands were free to touch her cheek, she looked at her husband in horror. "What's wrong with my face?" Hearing this question, William Peterson grimaced as if in great pain. Kelly started. It was he to choose the right words, But the woman interrupted him. "The mirror," she commanded. "I don't have one." "Then bring it. Bring it to me." "A mirror now," shouted the woman. "Honey, you're not alone here. This is a hospital, not a beauty parlor." "You got it." "I'm sorry." She came to her senses a little and realized she'd overdone it. William didn't stop by until just before she went home. "I gotta go. I'll be on the second shift tomorrow. I'll be there at 3 o'clock for tea." And he turned for the door, not even a goodbye kiss. He came back and was already bending down to kiss her when he heard her. "Don't be. I know perfectly well you're disgusted. What's this nonsense? I'll try to sleep at night. And this can all be fixed. I'd like to remind you that a lot of people aren't as lucky as you. And now they're living in a cemetery forever. And you're throwing a tantrum because of your looks. Good night, darling." And he left the room. "But I apologized," she shouted after her husband, but still felt as if someone's invisible cold hand had squeezed her heart. She couldn't sleep for a long time, thinking about her husband, about the plastic surgery. Now she was ashamed of her behavior. It was essentially not her spouse's fault. William seemed an endless period that it took Kelly to finally come to her senses. It became especially hard morally when she was transferred from the intensive care unit to the ward. She lay in a separate room and refused to go out into the corridor, so, as the woman put it, not to frighten the patients with her appearance. Recently, she saw herself in the mirror, and it was a real shock. And now it was discharge day. The doctor informed her that all the procedures were finished and Kelly could go home. She still limped a little, but it was a matter of time. The only thing Kelly was concerned about at the moment was plastic surgery. She knew several plastic surgeons already, and she had even written down the contacts of one of them. A friend had recommended it, arguing that everyone who went to him was very satisfied with the result. "Kelly, you should have seen him," Betty said, rolling her eyes dreamily. "I've never seen such a handsome man before. I mean, Alain Delon's a bit of a dud, but I don't think men should be so handsome. Maybe that's why he's in her memory when she gets home, and she'll contact him if he agrees. Wouldn't hesitate to go for counseling." After lunch, William came to pick her up, helped her pack her things, put her in a chair, and took her to her car. At home, her children were waiting for her at the festive table, and she wanted to lie down, but she could not offend her favorite children. After all, she understood how hard they tried. Lunch smoothly passed into dinner, and she, modestly saying that she was tired, went to the shower, after which she felt human. Later, William entered the bedroom. "Kelly, if you want, I can sleep in the other room for now." "Why?" "No, I miss you. Go back to your seat." He put out the light and put Yurka under the covers. "That's better. Or he'll lie down in the other room. She won't be so scared. And in general, be patient. Do the operation. Yes, I love you in every way. But I see how important it is to you, and I'm not talking you out of it. Don't save money on doctors. Pick the best one. Thanks, Vitrenko." She lay on his chest and immediately fell asleep. And when she woke up, there was no one home. The first thing she did was to call almost Alain Delon, but actually Simmons Ethan. But she could only talk to his secretary because, as the latter put it, Mr. Simmons was very busy and needed not only her. "How can you get me an appointment for counseling? Would he refuse to work with me?" Kelly wondered. Why would he refuse? The secretary didn't understand. "But my case is very complicated." "Well, just so you know, for Ethan, there are no complicated cases. He's the best. I know, that's why I want to discuss it with him. Consult in a week and discuss." "Okay, let's make it a week from now. What time is 11 o'clock okay?" "Yes, thank you, I will." A week before the consultation, I knew all about Simmons Kelly plastic surgery and the truth. Handsome, excellent specialist. But here's what really surprised her. He's single. Why would women overlook such a specimen? Kelly pondered. Very interesting. And on the appointed day at exactly 11 o'clock, Simmons took her to tell about the reasons that led to this appearance. Kelly waited for his verdict. The doctor examined every inch of her face long and meticulously. But even after such a close examination, he did not jump to conclusions. He looked through a magnifying glass for a long time, scrutinized every orb. Then he took the photograph and set the date of the operation in a month. Before that, to take all the tests. Tell me honestly, Ethan, how much chance do I have of regaining my former beauty? I'll do everything I can. And he took another hard look at her face. They said goodbye to the doctor. She walked out in the hallway. Her phone rang. Looking at the screen, the woman smiled. It was William. I just came out of the plastic surgeon's office. Surgery after a month. He promised to return everything back to the way it was. I'm very happy for you, dear, for she was the only one who was silent for a second. It's very expensive. We can pay for it. Don't even think about it. The money is my concern. And Kelly immediately calmed down. At home, Kelly surfed the internet every night looking for information about the Simmons. But all the reviews were positive. Probably somewhere in the back of her mind, she wished she could find something not so enthusiastic about the man. But it was all to no avail. Women all as one described what a professional he was in his work, and how after the operation their self-esteem returned to them. And one evening, while Kelly was lost at her laptop, her husband's voice echoed behind her. Who's that handsome guy you're scrutinizing? It's not handsome. It's my plastic surgeon. In an even tone, she replied, I'm just familiarizing myself with his work. And do you know what conclusion I came to? The husband looked at Kelly expectantly. If it's not Photoshop, then he really is a magician, does incredible things. And I really want to be on his operating table. But he doesn't like my test results. Well, I think you'll make it. William smiled, kissing his wife on the top of her head. The doctor knows what he's doing. I always respect a serious approach. Any self-respecting doctor would value two things, patience and reputation. And the next day, Kelly was contacted by Simmons' secretary and asked her to come in for a consult with the doctor. The repeat test results came back. The cab pulled up to the clinic at 9 o'clock, and she saw Ethan closing his car. It was the first time Kelly had seen him not in a robe, but in a perfectly fitting suit. The gray-colored shirt and tie that had always been an important accessory to a man's toilette caught her eye. Tied in a knot, working as a fashion designer, she'd been interested in that in her day, and hugging himself to the cab she was getting out of, he gave her a hand. Good morning, he said, and graciously let her pass in front. Kelly appreciated the morning Ethan. She could smell the light and very pleasant scent of his toilet water. It was a scent that had mesmerized her even last time. Now it had become very familiar to her, as if it had accompanied her since long ago. She didn't stay long in the hallway. Come in, Kelly. He had already changed into his usual snow-white robe, under which he wore the same snow-white t-shirt. He kept peering at her from head to toe, and noted to himself that the woman was quite interesting. I have good news for you. The repeat tests are normal, and we can set a date for the surgery. But there's less good news. The surgery isn't for another 2 months. I'm embarrassed to admit it, but I'm a little behind schedule. He saw her distress and rushed to reassure her. Don't feel bad, Kelly. Deadlines are relative. 2 months is if you stick to the schedule. But there are always force majeure circumstances and patients asked to reschedule, in which case I can do your surgery sooner. Just be ready at a moment's notice. The man really wanted to cheer up this beautiful woman, so he suggested, maybe for a cup of coffee, there's a lovely cafe nearby. Aren't you in a hurry for another surgery? Kelly wondered. No. The last day of the month is report day. No surgeries are scheduled on those days. But let's go. But Kelly shook her head no. You don't go out in public with a face like mine. You just spoil people's appetites. And to be perfectly frank, when I hear you say something like that, I feel like you're mocking me. Not at all, Kelly. Well, then it gets a lot worse. Goodbye. I'll look forward to hearing from your secretary. And she quickly left the office. 2 months, the woman pondered on her way out. That's an eternity. Maybe she should consider other doctors with less busy schedules. So once home, she started looking for other clinics. She liked 2 more. And the very next morning, she went to one of them. The doctor welcomed her warmly, examined her face at once, and offered to do the surgery the day after tomorrow. But do I have time to take all the necessary tests? Asked a stunned woman. Are you not feeling well? Surprised the doctor. No, but then I see no reason for a thorough examination. Let's do a blood test for inflammation. Thank God we have our own lab. So we'll have the results in a couple hours, that's all. So do we have a contract? Kelly didn't say anything. Her inner voice told her that wasn't an option. The doctor's examination was not as thorough as Simmons. Didn't order any tests. And the surgery the day after tomorrow, it's all too soon. As William would say, not a serious approach. You know, I decided to consult my husband again, she replied after a short thought. Good, the doctor agreed. Already with less enthusiasm. Next clinic. Kelly decided not to go. No way, she said to herself. I'll wait. It's better that way. A week later, Simon got a call from the clinic. Kelly, doctor, I'd like to see you. Can you come down here, please? A couple hours later, she was at the office. Come in, Kelly. I can tell you something. The patient who was supposed to be in surgery the day before yesterday has unfortunately fallen ill. That's basically what I called the circumstances. He said something else, and she thought she was glad to be with this man. Ethan Simmons, great company, especially when there's good news. Kelly, are you listening to me? Yeah, sure. The surgery's the day after tomorrow. I honestly couldn't hear the rest. And then I'm gonna invite you back for coffee. Let's go and sit in an outdoor cafe where it's less crowded and nature distracts from the attention to the customers. Well, okay, she put on again huge black glasses, lowered her bangs, tacks, and said, I'm ready. Into his huge car she got in quickly so no one would see her. The car smelled of leather and toilet water. Passers-by and stores flashed outside the windows. She didn't even ask where he was taking her. It didn't matter to her now. They sped through the air while obeying the rules of the road. Once on the highway, the car picked up speed, but quickly came to a stop, reaching a scenic area. I don't know why, Simmons muttered as he helped Kelly out of the car. But this little cafe makes mind-blowing coffee. It's worth the drive so far out of town. They left the cars on the curb and took the outermost table. And Kelly sat with her back to all the customers, even though there were only two, a couple in love who didn't need anyone but themselves. Are you comfortable? Yes, very nice and relaxed. I just have to make sure. Is the coffee really that good? You bet. The coffee was indeed excellent, and they drank 2 cups each. Then a brownie, which Kelly couldn't refuse. And then the conversation, which dragged on, and there was no desire to rush anywhere, only to listen. They felt they were becoming more than doctor and patient to each other. It was both joyful and frightening at the same time. Will and the children were waiting for her at home. And the next day at 9 o'clock in the morning, William Peterson drove his wife. Cosmetology went to the clinic. I myself want to look at the doctor in whose hands I give my treasure, smiling, said William. He did not go into details that he made inquiries about this clinic. The reviews about Simmons were indeed good, but he wanted to have a look at the clinic itself. Inside everything was respectable. The secretary is a pretty girl in a short robe. Everything was as it should be. Ethan walked towards them. Good morning, Kelly. Morning. I'd like you to meet my husband, William Corver. Your colleagues. He's a top-notch surgeon. Simmons extended his hand. Pleased to meet you, William nodded, noting the handshake. Why did his heart sound like that? What could have alerted him to this man? The man didn't understand. Kelly calm. What about him? Thank you, Will. I'll take it from here. If possible, William turned to Simon. It's better to use a local anesthetic. She's been under a general recently after major surgery, and her heart is not a fiery engine. I'll take it under advisement, Ethan replied. How can you do that? Give me a call. William asked and kissed her. Ethan watched the whole thing. He loves you, he said softly as the door closed behind him. I love him too. He's a wonderful man. And as I said, a surgeon by God. Okay, Kelly will show you to your room now. Surgery's scheduled for 11 o'clock. I already told you we're not going to get everything done today. It's too big a lesion. So don't expect me to take the bandages off in a couple hours and you'll go to your surgeon. Just be patient. Okay, I got it. At exactly 11 o'clock, they came to pick her up and escort her to the operating room. It was a small, clean, and bright room with all sorts of equipment and instruments. Dr. Simmons was already there. "Help the patient to lie down on this table," he asked the nurse. "And when she lay down, wearing a mask, I'll check. Ready?" "I think so," the woman replied, and he nodded to the anesthesiologist. The local anesthetic was slowly starting to take effect, and Kelly stopped feeling her body. From the shoulder up, she couldn't feel her head, as if it didn't even exist. The bright, shadowy lights of the operating room were shining directly into her eyes. The doctor bent over her so low that she could see the color of his eyes and his smoothly shaven and shaven face. His eyes looked confident, and she felt at ease. Everything was going well. Talking to her, he spoke to her. "Don't worry, everything will be fine. Just be patient a little longer. I think that's enough for today." Talking to her, he did not stop his work for a moment. His hands were plowing in front of his eyes, and she was interested in watching him. The operation lasted 3 hours. "Sleep on your back. Everybody rest." And she was wheeled to her room. And he sat up again. It was more work than Ethan had anticipated. But this was an unusual case. It's not just chin or eyelids. There really was jewelry work here. The next morning, he visited Kelly in her room. "How are you feeling?" "Sleepy." "Then get some rest. When's the next surgery?" But the plan is 5 days from now." "But it depends on how you feel." He left the room, and she was asleep. William called in the evening, and they had a little chat about her well-being and the children. 5 days later, Ethan began the next phase. Kelly wasn't nervous this time because she knew what was going to happen. The feeling was familiar, and she looked up at him and saw his smiling eyes. "I see you're not scared at all. That's wonderful. You've survived 1 day in particular. Today is the second. You probably don't know why these days are special, do you? Well, I'll tell you, because together we've taken a step toward a new face without scars and terrible cuts." She saw his eyes smile and covered her own. When she opened them, she was already lying in the room. Touching her hands gingerly, bandages. Sank back into sleep. And in the morning, Simmons visited her again. "How are you doing?" Kelly's face was mined, but her eyes, looking through the snaps of the bandages, smiled. And she gave him a thumbs up. He smiled back. "Be quicker this time. We'll continue until the day after tomorrow you'll rest. And then we'll make you beautiful. And this is for you, my employee put in the vase brought red rose for your excellent behavior in the operating room." One small step at a time. And William was inching closer to the day that would become Kelly's 3rd birthday. As soon as he arrived at the clinic, the first thing he did after putting on his gown was to rush to his patient's room. Like a magician pulling a flower out of his sleeve and giving it to her. He didn't like her very much today. She seemed a little sluggish. "How are you feeling?" The doctor asked. "Yesterday I was fine, but at night. And at night I felt cold. I think I had a fever. Did you inform the nurse about it?" "No, she hadn't gotten to me yet." "I had a fever, but a slight one." This infection scared Kelly. "I don't think so, but it's worth monitoring." She was wheeled into the OR in a wheelchair. All the stitches were clean. There was no inflammation at the surgical site. And Simmons breathed a sigh of relief. "Are you in any pain?" he asked. "No, nothing. Just a slight fever. Let's wait and see. I'll stay at the clinic today to make you feel better. Or maybe you should call your husband." Kelly offered shyly. "Don't you trust me?" "Well, if I didn't, I probably wouldn't be lying here." "Well, that's great. I think you're overly stressed. Stress can also cause a fever." So he asked the nurse to take the patient to her room when he came in after lunch. She was asleep. Ethan sat up for a while beside her. Her breathing was even. He touched her hands. They were warm. He had a circumferential facelift surgery today. He had to get ready, and he so hated to leave her. But work came first. It had taken him 45 years of his life since birth to become Ethan Simmons, a man admired by women and envied by other surgeons. But men admired him too. It was worth getting to know him. He had many friends among women and men. If he was an enemy to anyone, it was a ruthless one, because circumstances forced him to be so. But even those who envied and hated him could not deny him respect for his golden hands. He was a strong man, ready to fight to the end for what he believed in, and never abandoned his friends. His character was complex, and not everyone could stand him. That's probably why he reached such heights. Ethan's appearance was as impeccable as his reputation as a plastic surgeon. Tall, slender, gorgeous black hair, and with blue eyes that could radiate love and steel, depending on the circumstances. A slight unpleasantness conveyed his appearance and already sexy look. Unmarried. He was only because no woman could stand his work rhythm and the presence of so many beautiful ladies at work. To achieve what he had now, he had had to work hard and sacrifice his family. Kelly was therefore understandable. She looked like so many other women at Simmons with adoration. For today, he almost doubted himself. The temperature of his favorite patient confused him. The man was already ready for surgery when a nurse helped him lie down on the operating table. Another patient. An hour and a half later, he returned to Kelly. She had just opened her eyes. "How are you feeling now?" "I think better," she answered in a slightly hoarse voice. He was on his way out of the room when Oli's phone rang. "Will, hello." "Hello, my love. How are you doing?" "Yeah, it's going slow." "Don't worry, guys. We're fine. Can I visit you?" "Honey, I miss you." "No, Will, I'm in a state where there's nothing to see." "I'll meet you at home." "All right, what do you say?" She thought he was offended, but she still felt very bad, so she didn't want to upset him. In the evening, Simmons visited her again. He never went home and took her temperature, which was almost normal. They talked for a long time, both marveling at how pleasant each other's company was to them. They turned out to be very different, but it was all the more interesting to talk. He left her around midnight. "Good night," the doctor said. "I'll come and see you in the morning before I leave." "I'll be waiting," she replied and fell asleep with a smile on her lips. And when he came in the morning, she was very surprised. "Are you without a flower today?" she asked. "I see you're in a good mood." "Yes, without a flower. Tomorrow there will be a bouquet for that. Let's change the temperature." "I already measured it. It's normal." "But to be honest, you scared me, Kelly. I thought I'd become a lousy surgeon." "You call yourself a compliment." "Well, a word of endearment goes a long way with a cat." "No, I'm sorry, the cat. You're an excellent surgeon, Ethan. That's why I'm here." Thank you. You've put me at ease." And he leaned over and kissed her hand. Today was Kelly Makarova's last surgery. She's been tired for the past 2 months. The woman had undergone 5 surgeries, short and long, but each one brought her closer to her new appearance. She didn't see herself in the mirror and only believed the doctor's words. "Everything is going beautifully. I am satisfied," he told Kelly. One day William himself called Simmons and, introducing himself, asked permission to visit his wife. "I won't be long, I promise. I've only heard her voice for a month and a half. Do you miss her?" And there was a note of jealousy in his question. "Is it allowed or not?" William inquired, letting it pass his ears. Not exactly the doctor's correct question. "Of course, come in. I'll leave a pass for you." The nurse kindly escorted him to Kelly's room. "Hello, darling." "William, how did you get in here?" "My pass." "How are you?" "It's all tied up for now, but the doctor says it's going well, and he's pleased with the result. But the important thing is that it's pretty." "Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. You don't know how much I want to go home." "Why not? I do very well. We all miss you." "I miss you too." He completely forgot about the flowers he brought her, put out fruit, her favorite chocolate. "How's work going for you?" "What, maybe I have a new one, saving people every day, every hour." Sometimes I get the impression that people don't like themselves at all and don't value their health. How many people end up in the clinic because of their own stupidity? It's amazing. All this time he held her hand and stroked her palm with his thumb. She thought he had more gray hair and looked a little tired. "Are you from home?" "No, I'm after night duty and 2 night surgeries. I've noticed that I'm not pretty." "No, you're always handsome, even after night duty." He kissed her hand. "When the doctor gives you a prescription, he says first I said we'd take the bandages off, and then we'd see what happened." William would have loved to sit and talk to her some more, but he promised not for long. "I'm going to go. Kelly will call you tonight. Love you. Thanks for stopping by. It was good to see you." He put the bouquet in a vase where a white rose was already standing. The husband didn't ask where it came from. He didn't want to embarrass his wife, and he was pleased to realize that his wife liked other men, but no more than that. And in the evening, William called to say goodnight. Simmons came later, and they talked again until midnight. "We'll be saying goodbye soon, but you can always call me if anything goes wrong." "Well, if you count on that, I'll never call you," Kelly smiled. "Thank you. It's my pleasure. Can I just call you for a chat? It's a deal." A week later, she was invited to the dressing rooms. "Have a seat, Kelly. We're going to remove the bandages." When all the bandages had been thrown in the hamper, he scrutinized every inch of her face, like a sculptor forming new contours. "You know, I'm very pleased with my work. It couldn't have been done better. Quickly hand me the mirror." Kelly's voice was clearly impatient. "Kelly, I warn you, the face is still in the revitalization stage. There's some swelling and some beauty, but it will pass with time. A lot of work has been done. You just have to be patient for a little while longer. At your follow-up appointment in 2 weeks, you'll have your stitches removed. They'll be visible for a while too, but again, it's only temporary. Trust me, you heard me." "Yes," hesitantly, she said. Only then did he hand her the mirror. When she saw her face, she looked at him and tears flowed. "I don't know what you are satisfied with seeing this nightmare, but there's nothing left for me to do. How can I believe you again?" The tears rolled like peas, and she couldn't even contain herself. "When can I go home?" "Well, we'll observe you for a week," she interrupted him. 3 days, I'm gone." He didn't want to break up with her, but he realized that he wouldn't be able to keep her for the rest of his life anyway. So he said okay. All 3 days she lay facing the wall, and when he came in, he talked to her back. After 3 days, the swelling had gone down considerably, which made Kelly very happy, but the beauty still held. The night before, she called her husband to tell him she was being discharged. "Can you pick me up?" "Just not first thing in the morning. 12 o'clock would be fine." "No, I want to leave early." "Okay, I'll call a cab. I'll meet you at home." In the morning, she packed her bag, checked all the drawers to make sure she hadn't forgotten anything, and headed for Simmons' office. "Ethan, I called a cab. I'm leaving for home in 15 minutes. "Okay, hold on. It won't be long before the discharge papers are ready." He handed her a document. "I wish you a healthy Kelly, and don't ever come back to us again. Thank you for everything you've done for me." The woman didn't expect him to hug her, and she sighed again. The same delicious perfume enveloping her in his car. "Give me your bag. I'll walk you to the cab." When they left the clinic, the car was already waiting for her. Opening the door, he helped her in and waved her in, but happy. It was the last day of the month. He had paperwork to do, as usual, and there was a lot of work piling up, but he didn't feel like doing anything. "I've gone home," he told the nurse. "We have 2 surgeries tomorrow." "Okay, Ethan." The man drove home in a terrible mood. He missed her already and berated himself for not giving her a ride home himself. When Kelly got home, there was a return apartment waiting for her, dinner prepared. Both kids hadn't gone to the institute, getting ready to see their mom. She was happy to see them, cradling them in her arms. They became quite grown up, but most importantly, the children were healthy. "Why did God send me such happiness?" Looking at them, Kelly said. Lunch turned into dinner, and the family gathered around the table and couldn't get enough of talking. William was happy to see the whole family together. No one was paying attention to Kelly's face, and she had forgotten what it had been like to see her own reflection in the mirror. The children scattered to their rooms, and William talked to Kelly about everything. When the house was quiet, she sat at the table and enjoyed the comforts of home. And in the morning it was getting late. William closed the windows with curtains to keep the sunlight out of his eyes. Thus, he hoped to prolong his wife's sleep, but alas, the day was coming with the noise of cars, sunlight, and the voices of the boys in the kitchen. A little lower. In bed, she got up without putting on her robe, and Kelly wandered around the apartment in her nightgown, enjoying the freedom. Taking a mirror in hand, the woman, carefully impersonating a doctor, examined her face. The swelling was almost gone. There was only a little bit left to beauty. Of course, a great transformation was visible. Now it was even scary to remember what had happened to her face. She was knocking back her coffee when the phone rang. Looking at the display, she saw that it was Betty. "How are you doing? Are you beautiful already, or did the doctor's office not live up to expectations?" "Hello, Betty." "No, the doctor is wonderful. Everyone loves him, and I'm one of them now. He's very competent, and I believe every word he says. I feel great. Thank you for the advice to go to him. And what kind of handsome man did you appreciate?" "Yeah, he's an interesting man. I can't argue with that. But your will is just as good. So you're the envy of the world. I guess you're right about that when you're supposed to shoot in 2 weeks. Great. So we'll set up a meeting later. Everyone can't wait to see you refreshed." "I agree. I miss you guys too." 2 weeks went by fast. Kelly rested, regained her strength, and waited for a call from the clinic. "Hello, Kelly. This is the Simmons Clinic. It would be convenient for you to arrive at 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon." "Why not in the morning?" "Ethan has a surgery, and then he'll take care of you." Okay. I'll be there." Simmons purposely rescheduled the surgery for the morning so he could take care of Kelly and then take her out to a coffee shop or restaurant to celebrate the successful completion of the surgery. He tried to dial her phone number 14 times in 14 days and then put it off. Speaking of himself, he said he could not interfere in a family where the husband loved his wife so much. It was visible to the naked eye, but he was drawn to her like a magnet, helped by work, and he forgot for a while. Tonight he would finally see her. At exactly 200 hours, she knocked on his office door. "May I?" Yeah, come on in, Kelly. How are you feeling?" Fine. Let's go to the OR." While he put on his gown, mask, gloves. The nurse helped Kelly change and lay on the table. Everything was already familiar, the light of his face quite close and the lights in his blue hair. There was going to be a little complaining. A little unpleasant, bear with me. There will be a feeling of skin tightness afterward. The slight discomfort will pass quickly and you will be a beauty in a month. All this he told her without stopping working for a moment. When he was done, the nurse nodded and she did her part. "You can all get up now," he said to Kelly. The nurse helped and walked out of the operating room. "Kelly, do you have any urgent matters to attend to?" asked the doctor without looking at her. "No, I'm completely free." "Then let me invite you to celebrate the end of our collaboration." "I agree," Kelly replied immediately. "Feel free to go to the restaurant. And you won't be embarrassed with me," she smiled. "Of course not." "Well, then I'm not ashamed either." At the restaurant, they took the farthest table. "Kelly, you look so beautiful, and that suit looks great on you." "Thank you." Offering her hair, the woman replied. It was lunchtime, so it was time to eat. "What can I get you?" he asked. "I want a lot of vegetables too." "That's fine. Then I'll have the veal with vegetables too. You can have some wine if you like." "I'd support you too, but I'm driving." "All right then, red dry." "I'm flying to London on Monday, Kelly. I'm going to a conference for plastic surgeons. There's always a lot of interesting stuff there. I took pictures of you and 2 of my other patients. I'll be bragging. Let me know how it goes. Do you really wonder?" Ethan looked at her in surprise. "Of course I'm curious if they like my picture." Ethan laughed. "I can tell you right now that they'll like it." Glancing at her watch, she exclaimed to Ethan, "I have to go." "Okay, I'll give you a ride." He showed the waiter. He paid for his lunch and, pushing Kelly's chair away from the table, helped her up. He took the longest way to her house. "Well, here we are," she said with regret in her voice. "Thank you again for bringing me back to life." Simmons opened the car door and helped her out and said goodbye. She looked after his car and waved. A month and a half later, they met at a conference of surgeons, but already in Russia. There was a plenary session, and then the surgeons went to their sections. They bumped into each other at the entrance to the hall. "Hello, Kelly," and he shook hands with Vitaly Peterson. "How are you feeling?" "Fine. But I'll be fine soon." "And you're interested in surgery now?" "Yes, I often accompany my husband to such events." "That's commendable," and he let her go on ahead into the room. The Orlovsky spouses sat somewhere in the middle of the hall, and Ethan had a short speech at the plenary session and a large, detailed one at the plastic surgeons section. He had to talk about a trip to England. A month later, Kelly went to work. All the sick leave at her own expense was over. She missed her favorite job and the people she had spent 9 years of her life with. Kelly was a good fashion designer. Her success as a fashion designer was determined by her personal qualities. She wasn't afraid to say, "I don't know," and she loved to learn. Her innate artistic taste, imagination, and flexibility of thought helped her in sketching. She was an innovator. She listened attentively to fashion trends. She was fond of new technologies. The woman did not like to work with ready-made sketches, which were created by designers. She did everything herself. In her models, you could feel the hand of a professional. I adore her chosen field. And every time she looked forward to the upcoming fashion show, she could already see their models being sold out in the stores. Whatever she did at work, she loved it. She was passionate about her work. But when she looked at herself in the mirror, she remembered her doctor, and her heart began to beat in a purified rhythm. Kelly considered herself a happy mother and a loving wife, was perfectly content with life and her marriage of almost 20 years. Those years, from the moment she married Vitaly, flew by like a blink of an eye. Very quickly, they became weather parents. Therefore, for 6 years, the young mother was engaged with the children and the house, and it suited her quite well. Household chores never seemed burdensome to her. She was never annoyed by the need to drive and transport her children from daycare. Now that the children were grown, she could do the things she loved to do. But it bothered her to think about Dr. Simmons too often. He missed her dearly, too. He would go to model shows and see her there, always passing the bouquet through someone, but never leaving a note. Yeah, he didn't need one. Kelly knew who the gift was from. Started looking for him with her eyes, but she couldn't find him. She tried to call him a few times, but something stopped her. They met again at the fundraiser and ran into each other in the check room. "Good evening," Simmons said. "Didn't you and I often find ourselves looking at Ethan, then Kelly?" William inquired. "I prefer to do it more often," Ethan replied. He tilted his head slightly. Kelly watched them from the side. He was tall, slender, each handsome in their own way and both excellent surgeons. "Will, what are you doing? Doesn't he have a right to be at this party? Who do you think you are?" "No, he's just not looking at you like a doctor." "Well, that's right. He's not my doctor anymore." "Don't be ridiculous. You're hurting my feelings." Ethan tried to keep out of the guy's sight, but as fate would have it, they kept running into each other at meetings and conferences. It was like she was testing them on purpose, making their hearts beat faster and blood rush at a frightening rate. They'd almost bumped heads once in a restaurant. Ethan glanced over at Kelly and with a nod, made his way to the table where a lady was waiting for him. Why did Kelly's mood immediately sour? Why did she find the woman so unworthy? Ethan. Asking herself these questions, she didn't even try to answer them. And so a year passed. The Simmons Clinic flourished. He was even forced to take on an assistant to a promising young surgeon. At once it became easier, and he wished he had done it sooner. For the spring model show, he showed up with the same lady. He was afraid that if he was alone, he wouldn't stand for it and would approach Kelly. But he realized he had no right to do that, and she looked backstage and searched for him with her eyes. And finally, she found him. He was sitting directly across from the model's exit, and Kelly saw the same lady next to him. No sooner had she pouted her lips than a bouquet was brought to her. Again without a note, but again she didn't need one. The woman already knew everything. She quickly grabbed her phone before she changed her mind and dialed a single word. "Thank you." She watched him from backstage. He opened the message, smiled, and hid the phone. But the smile, she thought, was sad. It had been a year and a half since the surgery. Looking at her face, she thought it had always been like that. That morning, she was getting ready for work and putting on light makeup. It was quiet. The kids were getting ready for the institute, and Maria Mom's sudden shout of "Where's my wallet?" made Kelly startled. Her hand trembled, and she scratched a piece of skin on her face with her fingernail. Clamping the wound with an alcohol-soaked cotton pad, she hailed a cab and drove to the clinic. Simmons they met in the hallway. Something was wrong. She put the disc away. She got the disc. "I accidentally nicked it with my fingernail. And I don't think I'm worried. Now get dressed and let's go to the OR. I had to put in a neat little stitch. It's no big deal. It's uncomfortable, but it's not fatal." Don't worry, you'll have to wear a Band-Aid. Come back in 2 days. I'll take a look. You can get up now. You write the bill, I'll pay everything." He nodded and went into the office. When she came in after him, he turned sharply to her and said, "I've missed you, Kelly, and I've wanted to see you all the time. I missed the look of your voice, the smell of you." He continued to say something, making her lose herself in reality. "I can't do it without you. I've tried, but it doesn't work. I missed our conversations too." He wrapped his arms around her, and she didn't want to push him away. Ethan. It felt like if he broke the embrace now, he'd miss her forever. "I've tried to stay away from you, but it's not working. I love you, Kelly," he whispered, looking into her beautiful eyes. "I probably love you too." Even more quietly, the woman said, and he put all the tenderness and love he had for her into his kiss, and she responded with just as much desire. Now they were doing what they had forbidden themselves to do for a year and a half. Perhaps their time had come. It was a derangement of reason. Obsession, mad infatuation, obsession, passion. You could call it all sorts of things. But they didn't linger now. Nothing needed to be said. They felt everything. After a year and a half apart, Ethan and Kelly became lovers. "Ethan, hi. I finally got you on the phone. How are you?" "Better now." "Do you want me to fly up to you?" "I'd love to. I need someone to share it with, someone to talk to. I'm wandering around the house like a ghost." "Aren't you working?" "No, I'm working now. Otherwise, I'd probably go crazy." "Okay, I'll call you as soon as I get the tickets. I'll be really looking forward to seeing you." Thomas was a childhood friend, the one and only for life. At first, they had lived near each other, gone to the same kindergarten, then sat at the same desk at school and fought off the local bullies together. They went to college together. Although Thomas didn't really want to go to medical school, he decided to go with his friend. 6 years at the institute brought the boys even closer together. His friend did not work as a doctor, but organized his own clinic, where excellent specialists worked. He turned out to be a great organizer and administrator. And the inheritance left by his parents helped in opening the clinic. He had to weigh a lot of things, think, plan, calculate what it will cost him this or that project, and whether the game is worth the candle. And so far, he hasn't been wrong. He had a gut feeling, which did not deceive him. True, the friends were now far apart. Ethan in New York, David in Toronto, but the distance did not prevent the friends from socializing and meeting more often at the earliest opportunity. Thomas was in New York on business. Ethan, having extensive acquaintances and connections, helped his friend to solve unsolvable problems. Thomas had a family, 2 beautiful daughters and a son. His wife worked at his clinic. There were no outbursts of jealousy because, unlike Ethan, Thomas dealt with paperwork and his wife didn't see it as a threat to her marriage. And Ethan was alone again. And at the thought of her, the man's heart clenched. Many women wanted to be near this successful man, but the place really belonged to Kelly alone. Of course, so did Thomas, but in another sense, he had no operations today. But Ethan got up at 700 am anyway, washed and cleaned up, and called the clinic. "Everything's in place?" he asked. "Are you ready for surgery?" "Yeah, we're good." "Ethan is ready and everything is in place. Call me if anything goes wrong." "Okay." Cell phone rings. It's a house. He bought it for her to live here, to breathe the forest air, to swim in the small, clean river in the summer. And now this house he hated. It was empty and cold without Oli in it. Ethan hadn't felt so happy in years. And never in his life had there been a woman like Kelly, beautiful, exciting. Simmons fell in love with her as soon as he saw her. And they didn't even know each other. She's a patient, a married woman with 2 grown children. He's a doctor, but once they talked, they both realized they were attracted to each other. Ethan admired her ability to look both sexy and elegant at the same time. He was pleased to realize that such an interesting woman was in love with him. Kelly, on the other hand, thought that everything that happened between them was a special atmosphere. The doctor saves the patient and gives her back her beautiful face. Kelly wanted to believe in what was happening between them. She wanted to believe that everything that was happening, that what was going on between them was sincere. She had never had another man in her life other than her husband, and he was the only one she felt the most important relationship with. Competing with William was difficult. Even a very handsome, reliable, intelligent, and charming man. He loved his Kalinka as he had the first day they met. But Ethan had turned everything in her mind upside down. They had always been good together. This woman was to him the embodiment of everything a man could dream of in his life. Kelly was his fairy tale princess, not only beautiful, but also smart seductive. All in all, the best. They were crazy about each other. She gave Ethan that special state of mind that made him want to move mountains. They enjoyed each other's company. He had never imagined he would be so happy with just her presence. Ethan would never forget the time spent with her. In the evening, Thomas called again. "I leave tomorrow at 8 p.m. I've got the number. Tell me I'll meet you, but it'll be at night." "Yeah, I don't care, I don't sleep. I'd rather meet you." "Okay, well, whatever you need me to do to get there myself." Now Ethan slept only before the operation, taking sleeping pills to make him sleepy in the evening. Today, he was on his way to meet a friend. He was glad to see him. It was quite dark outside when he drove out of the house. It was still about 40 minutes until Thomas arrived, and he was excited to walk around the lounge. Looking at his watch, he heard the airplane. When he looked at his watch, he heard that the Toronto-New York plane had landed at the airport. Ethan hadn't seen Thomas yet, but he was already smiling. "But it's taking a long time. Our friend didn't come out for a long time." Both Ethan and Ethan craned their necks, looking for him. "You'll be looking for me for a long time." There was a familiar voice behind me. Ethan turned around, looking at you with all his eyes. "Well, hello, friend. It's good to see you," and they hugged. "I hope you didn't come for 2 days." Ethan asked hopefully, looking at Thomas. 2 weeks. Great. It was said sincerely because Ethan understood how hard it was for his friend to get away, to leave his family and job, and devote 2 weeks to a friend. You don't look good," Thomas concluded. "Be thankful I'm still alive. And to be honest, I still don't believe that what happened to me was real." Talking, they quickly reached the house. "This is quite a palace," Thomas said when he saw the mansion. "It's not too big for you. It is bigger even for my family. I want to sell it and buy an apartment near the office so I can walk to work." "That's a great idea, Mr. Plastic Surgeon." While Thomas showered, Ethan prepared a simple breakfast. Ethan made a simple breakfast, and they sat across from each other, drinking coffee and wrinkling their faces at the pleasant smell of the beverage. "You go get some rest. I'll go to the clinic." "Rest up, Thomas. It's a deal." His friend fell asleep as soon as his head hit the pillow. Ethan stopped by the clinic, where he hadn't been for 2 days. But things were going on as usual. Everyone was in place, and everyone was busy doing their own thing. It was literally half an hour. He drove back. On the way, he bought good cognac, meat, cheese, caviar. And when he entered the house, there was silence. Thomas was still asleep. He took care of the meat. He battered it well, roasted it a little on both sides, and put it in the oven. He made sandwiches, sliced sausage and cheese, turned on the TV quietly, and waited for him to come down. About an hour later, Thomas came down a little backed up with bangs of black hair. It brought back memories of sleeping over at each other's houses as kids and getting up in the morning. Exactly the same way. "Your place is so quiet, so peaceful." "It's quiet in my house. Only at night, when everyone's quiet." "That's beautiful, Thomas. Family's important." "How long have you known that?" "I've always known it. The thing is, not all the women could compete with my work. They always thought I loved them less." "What do you think?" "They were right. I guess I've got the meat ready. I'm not much of a cook, so I didn't try anything fancy. I just did the basics." "But you're good. I can't even do that," grinned my friend. "That's how we live. But you like it, don't you?" "Yes, but when I get tired, I have a place to run away for 2 weeks. It's harder for my wife. She doesn't have a friend like that." Ethan was smiling. It was like he was alive, and the house didn't seem blind to him anymore. They went into the dining room, and he put his arm around his friend's shoulders. It was a rather spacious room furnished with furniture in soft stock colors. On the walls hung paintings with appropriately themed reproductions. Looking at the paintings, Thomas asked. Ethan nodded. There was a large Kiev palm tree in the corner, and the dining room window overlooked the garden. But there were tempting aromas coming from the table, and the men felt hungry. And you have a very cozy and clean place with someone helping you. The man nodded and pointed Thomas to the table. Ethan couldn't start a conversation about himself, and Thomas didn't rush him. They had been sitting for over an hour, sipping cognac. They took their time, reminiscing a lot. Ethan even laughed, something he hadn't done in 4 months. There was a deep crease between his eyebrows, and his hair was graying. He spoke suddenly, and Thomas prepared himself to listen. It was an important quality in a man. He never interrupted, but was patient and tried to see the situation from the outside. He avoided hasty, judgmental assessments. This created a favorable atmosphere for conversation. Now I know for sure that fate does not like those who have everything. Ethan glanced over at Thomas. I realized this to the fullest extent when yesterday I was a successful businessman and the best surgeon. A full house and, most importantly, a loving, beloved woman. Turns out, what I used to think was love was a big mistake. Can you believe it? I only knew true love with her. With this incredible woman. Why didn't you marry her? Taking advantage of the pause, Thomas asked. 365 times a year I asked her to be my wife. And 365 times she gave me reasons to postpone it. The children are still in school. If I left, they might drop out. Then the kids had to get jobs. Then my daughter had her first love. Then my husband had a promotion. I had to support him. And so on for almost all 6 years. We dreamed with her about how we would live together, where we would spend our vacations. She tossed herself between her husband and me. It was easier for me. I'm a man, I'm free. She was married. A loving mother. I understood all that and was content to see her. Did your husband guess about your relationship? Ethan answered this question not immediately. There was such silence in the house that one could hear the huge floor clock ticking in Ethan's study. But a hurricane was raging in the man's soul. He was reliving the tragedy all over again. I think he guessed. He even came to my clinic. We had a very long talk. Quietly, calmly, and let Kelly decide for herself. But she didn't come to me right after our first explanation and our one kiss. She disappeared for 2 months. She didn't even come back for the shock. Then I found out that William had done it himself. I had no right to rush her, realizing how hard it was for her to decide. On one side of the scales of 20 years of married life, 2 children, and a loving husband, and on the other a love affair that flared up. Perhaps she was expecting that this love that flared up so quickly would extinguish even more quickly. But it didn't, and one day she came to me on her own. Can you imagine that day and hour I remembered for the rest of my life? To give his friend a break from the heavy memories, Thomas raised a shot glass. Ethan, let's drink to your happy future. It's impossible without her, he said, in a shaky voice. Anything is possible in life, and they drank. The bottle of cognac was long since empty, and both men were completely sober. The first time she called me If was when she burst into my apartment after 2 months away. If, I can't be without you. She said it then. I've tried, but I can't do it. And she hugged me. At that moment, I was the happiest person in the world. She stayed with me until late afternoon and went home. I didn't want to let her go. You can't imagine. I loved everything about her. I adored her. I didn't even realize you could love each other so passionately. I could hardly concentrate on my work. I enjoyed giving her gifts. To fulfill her every whim, and she didn't want much. You know the song. There's a sweetheart around. That's the one. A year went by like that, but nothing changed. We used every minute to be together. We didn't know how to handle it. Kelly thought it would all work out in time, but time passed. The knot was getting tighter and tighter, and she couldn't find a solution. I loved her so much that I was ready to let her go when I saw her suffering. But she wouldn't even hear of it. I can't be without you, Ethan. I need you. So move in with me, and it'll be easier for everyone to put an end to this. That's when she started crying. I know, she'd interrupt me, but I can't do this right away. I have a life. Kelly, I mean right away, it's been almost 2 years. She'd start crying again, and I couldn't stand her tears, and I'd immediately apologize for pushing her. As he was saying this, he didn't notice the mountain of torn paper napkins that lay beside him. He was tearing them with fury. Thomas didn't touch him, realizing the man needed to vent his negativity, and all your dreams of living together remained a dream. He asked. Yes, they were. It didn't work out. We kept seeing each other every spare minute. I bought this house for her to be more outdoors, to relax, but she always thought about her children, who also arranged her scandals and expressed their discontent. And after another domestic scandal, she disappeared again for 2 months. I called her to see if everything was all right. Yes, she replied in her iron voice, I was fine. I remember that night I got drunker than ever. On principle, alcohol is the anesthesia that allows you to undergo the operation called life. I didn't want to live, but I didn't make any claims against her, realizing she was having a harder time than I was. After a couple weeks, I started to let go, and I was working like crazy. It saved me a lot. I took on the most complicated surgeries at the time when I was so stressed, and I had a great result. I was surprised myself, but the patients were very satisfied. Their conversation was interrupted by a phone call. Ethan, you can come to the clinic right away. Something's happened. Yes, there's something wrong with a patient here. Okay, I'll be right there. He washed and cleaned up, called a cab. Thomas, watch TV. Give me a break. I'll be right back. But Thomas decided to look around the house. It took him an hour. He went into Ethan's study. It was in perfect order. Only a few white sheets and a pen were out of order. They were poems. Even Thomas didn't know that Ethan's writing on poems was them again. As he read through the outline, he realized that he had truly loved this woman and had suffered a tragedy. Ethan came back a couple hours later. Did you get everything sorted out? Yeah, thank God they managed without me. Ethan, I'm sorry, but I've been reading your poems, and I love them. They convey your pain, the depth of the tragedy you've suffered. I didn't know you had a talent for it. It's true what they say. A talented man is talented at everything. But Ethan waved his hand and let's go and buy you some real Indian tea, given by a grateful husband, and they both laughed. For some time they were silently enjoying the aroma of the drink. Ethan suddenly asked his friend, Tell me, how can I go on living? Nothing pleases me. Not even my once favorite job. Ethan, everything passes. It will pass, and this time heals. Your soul hurts. All you have to do is wait. So what happened next? Thomas asked. 2 months later, she came again. She looked awful. You don't feel well. I asked her. Yes, she replied. I don't feel well without you. Then stay. She nodded and stayed. In the morning, we had breakfast and felt almost like a family. All the 5+ years we've been seeing each other whenever we had the chance. I think back now and wonder how we managed it. But I guess these things happen. I lived from her leaving to her returning to me and marveled that a year had passed. Then 2, 3, 4. We were good together. But even then, she found reasons to wait a little longer. I didn't consider those reasons to be reasons. It was more like an excuse not to change anything. I had given up all hope of seeing her around as a wife. But 5 years passed, and one day she came to me with a suitcase. When I opened the door to her, I stood like a stumbling block, and she threw the suitcase, hugged me, pressing her nose against my neck. And she was crying quietly. Why are you crying? For joy. Because I decided to take this step, and you're there for me. We talked all night. She told me that William quietly let her go, saying that the sacrifices she was trying to make to save her family were of no use to anyone. Everyone had figured it out a long time ago. But you know this, he told her. If you need my help, call me right away. So the point was finally made. And we started living together. She never filed for divorce. I was never meant to be her husband. I made her quit her job. She looked terrible. She couldn't sleep at night. Walked around the house like a ghost. But after 2 or 3 months, she calmed down. She slept again, had an appetite. I hired a cook so she wouldn't cook, but rest. He cooked delicacies for her 6 months later. My beloved came to life, ran up to me. And that's when I decided it was happiness. She was a beacon for me, a guiding star, a light in the window. And I knew it would always be that way, no matter what happened. 8 months of happiness, taking a 2-week vacation. She and I flew to Paris, spent unforgettable days in the city of love. She chose where to go, what to see. But I would have been happy even if we were in a hotel room. We went to the movies, walked around Paris, talked about everything that came to mind. And sometimes we would just sit next to each other and be silent. Feeling perfectly happy, we could talk about literature, painting, fashion, theater. She was a versatile person, and I was surprised to find that she knew as much about painting as she did about fashion. We could talk about our parents, about childhood dreams and youthful desires, and the beginning of adulthood and careers. We were never bored. Women I knew, looking at us, would often say to me later, "What do you see in her? She pales next to you." And I wondered how they couldn't see the beauty of this goddess. She was beautiful. She was absolutely made for me. And then I realized that any even divine perfection causes envy and irritation in mere mortals. So I smiled condescendingly and in a minute forgot what they were talking about. Why has fate treated me so unfairly? Ethan asked Thomas, "Why isn't she here? And I'm sitting here drinking cognac with you. It wasn't supposed to be like this." His friend sat looking at him and thinking how much was still a very deep wound, too fresh for him to think about anything but his loss. The thought of living and enjoying life, Ethan found sacrilegious. Life is such a thing, you never know what's around the corner. Thomas said, knowing full well that it was a poor consolation. As for Ethan himself, he was not relieved by this conversation. On the contrary, he felt infinitely lonely, neglected, unwanted. And Thomas seriously doubted whether Ethan would ever be able to forget his beloved woman. Not even to forget, and at least to stop feeding you for her departure and live with hindsight. He won't be able to let another one into his heart for a long time. After 8 months, I began to notice that something was happening to her. To all my questions, she said she had a slight headache. I looked at the pills she was taking. They were painkillers. Sometimes at night, she'd sit in the living room and watch TV, even though it hadn't been on for a long time. "Kelly, are you feeling sick?" "No, just insomnia." "How's your headache?" Then she started to look better and even had some fun. But after 2 months, her condition worsened dramatically. She held her head and said the pills didn't help. "Should we go to the clinic?" "No, I'm not going. It'll pass now." But I saw that her condition was terrible, and this time I didn't give in. I took her by the hand and, no matter how much she resisted, put her in the car and drove her to the paid clinic. Her complexion, as we drove, had turned a sort of gray and she looked as if she had aged. I realized, something terrible is happening. "Yeah, I don't need help. I don't need the clinic," she assured me. "Kelly, do this for me so I can rest assured that nothing terrible is happening to you." "Okay, but this is the last time I'm not going to any more clinics. I've had enough of those hospitals." "God," I asked then. Only if she was all right, although deep down I was prepared to hear the worst. Even mentally, I was already thinking about what lies I would tell Ola if she was found to have a terrible disease. But God did not hear me because the tests were disappointing. The brain tumor was not opera. "You came too late," the doctor told me, "at least a couple months earlier, and now it's too late. You're a doctor, you can see for yourself. I'm taking her to Germany, to Israel, where they can help. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but it's useless. Before you torture your wife, send those test results and you'll get an answer. I'm 200% sure it will be the same. Again, I'm sorry. Okay, not the surgery. But it's possible to prolong her life. If not stop, at least slow down the progression of the disease. Let's start the treatment, the medicine, the money, it's all there. Of course, we are not refusing treatment, but you must be ready at any moment. The tumor's too deep, there's a lot of blood vessels. We're not gods either, and we can't do everything yet," the doctor said regretfully. Kelly was admitted to the clinic. I sent her tests to every clinic in the world. In Germany, they refused immediately. In Israel, they gave me hope at first, but then they refused. So I called my friend in the States, asked him to find out everything, sent the tests. They told him to let him come, but we can't give any guarantees. The disease is neglected. Then I called Vitaly and asked to meet him. He only specified where and when. We met in the park. We looked at each other without anger, but we didn't give each other a hand. Kelly is dying, I said, and he immediately turned pale. What's wrong? Brain tumor. Gleb Plastum immediately asked him. Yes, all the clinics refused to take her. The tumor's not for. You can see the MRI results. I brought them with me at the time, and when he saw them, he cried. We both lost her. The treatment did nothing. And 2 months later, my snail was gone. I still can't believe it. That it's gone. It may sound cliché, but death is hard to get used to, especially since she suffered so much. A terrible death. Thomas said quietly. For the first month, I didn't know what to do. I felt like a ship without a helmsman, doomed to sail the seas forever and not docked on any shore. I told you fate doesn't like those who have everything. That's why it was taken from me, and covering his face with his hands, Ethan sobbed like a child. Thomas sat there unable to utter a word. He was crushed by the story and didn't know how to help his friend. It was as if Ethan had read his mind. Don't worry, Thomas. I could have told you all that. So back to life. She's not alive, but I am alive, though I think it's unfair. If, in the opinion of those who knew our history, she did not deserve heaven, at least let her find peace, Ethan said. Will you be happy? Thomas took his hand. Probably, but not for a while.